Yuya is only a freshman in high school, but now he was sitting in the living room, facing a group of menacing figures dressed in black suits and sunglasses. Their cheeks bore prominent scars, making it clear to anyone who saw them that they were not to be trifled with. Yuya replied that he didn't know where his father was, as he had only just arrived home. One of them picked up the letter he had found on the table, the words of which angered the man so much that he tore it to shreds. The letter stated that Yuya's father had run away, and not only that, he had abandoned his son. While he continued to curse his father as a terrible father, Yuya thought that life was indeed unpredictable, just like his father's proverb. His father was the type of person who tirelessly researched and created new products, hoping they would become trends. But he was always one step behind, causing his debts to pile up. What's worse is that within his family, his mother still loves his father. His mother has retained her beauty, despite her age, and when she's with Yuya, people often mistake them for siblings. He feels proud of his mother because she's still youthful and a great cook. He asked his mother why she married a useless man like his father. His mother replied that she loved the way his father worked tirelessly, from one job to another, even though he was a failure. Yuya could understand how love could blind people, and he looked upon the hardest working people with respect. However, his father had crossed a threshold where he could still show him respect. Guilt began to well up in Yuya for not telling them about his situation sooner. He asked Taka, the intimidating man, about the money his father had borrowed from him. Taka was initially angry but then calmed down, knowing that getting angry with Yuya was pointless. Finally, Taka politely told Yuya that the debt was 30 million yen, a huge sum even for a high school student. Taka explained that Yuya's father kept borrowing money to pay off his debts, and as a result, his debt just kept increasing. Yuya wasn't actually afraid of Taka or anyone else, as he'd known Taka since elementary school. Although Taka seemed tough, he was actually very kind, always acting like an older brother to Yuya. Yuya wondered how he could possibly pay 30 million yen, but all his savings were just a drop in the ocean compared to that enormous sum. Taka was furious at Yuya's father's actions, abandoning his own son and leaving everything to the lawyers to handle. Yuya could never have imagined how much his father would lower himself to humiliate himself in such a way. Yuya recalled that when he returned home, he only found a card left on the table stating that his father had left, leaving everything to be handled by a lawyer. Taka said it was a miracle that Yuya had grown up to be the way he is now. Despite living in such difficult family circumstances, Taka then mentioned that he was the reason Yuya had grown into the person he is today. Yuya acknowledged this, admitting that he had truly learned a lot from Taka because everyone around him was useless. Taka asked Yuya what he would do next in this situation and said that this time, he couldn't deceive his boss anymore. He couldn't cover for Yuya anymore. Taka informed Yuya that he might have to take Yuya along with him. Yuya understood what Taka meant and knew that he now had no choice but to shoulder the debt his parents had left behind. He hoped he could resolve everything in a respectful way, but it felt like his life was coming to an end. Taka placed his hand on Yuya's shoulder, reassuring him that he would convince the boss to let Yuya work under his protection. Taka genuinely cared about Yuya and wanted to do everything he could to give him a decent life. Yuya felt relieved to hear those words, and the others behind Taka also supported him, advising him to stay the way he was and not become an uneducated person like them. Finally, after the conversation ended, Taka suggested everyone leave immediately because they had promised to show Yuya the best things they could do for him. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Yuya opened the door and was surprised to see Kaede standing in front of him. She said she had come to help him. With a smile on his face, Yuya was completely disoriented by her beauty. Kaede possessed long, straight black hair, bright, pearly eyes, and a stunning beauty that would put even magazine models to shame. She was like a goddess who had just stepped out of a painting, standing before him. Yuya still couldn't believe that Hitotsuba was standing here talking to him. She was as cute and sweet as she appeared, making him wonder if there wasn't a single student at his private Meiwadai High School who wasn't smitten with her. She was a beauty who had won the Grand Prix at last year's National High School Girl Beauty Pageant, making her almost the most beautiful high school girl in Japan, with a mature appearance and perfect figure. Her occasional smiles were like those of a goddess, captivating not only men but also women. Yuya was also one of Kaede's admirers, so he couldn't help but wonder how she knew where he lived. Since they had never spoken before, Kaede asked him why he was silently staring at her without saying anything. Seeing his face flushed, she worriedly asked if he had a cold. Yuya replied that he didn't have a fever and was fine. But then, Kaede took off her shoes, walked closer to him, and placed her hand on his forehead to check his temperature. She asked him to stand still, then placed her hand on his head to make sure he was all right. Yuya's face turned redder than ever, and Kaide could sense that he was getting a little hot. She asked if they should take him to the hospital, but Yuya replied that he was perfectly fine and that she might just be imagining a fever. He then frankly asked her why she had come to his house and how she wanted to help him. Kaide smiled and asked permission to come inside, but Yuya felt a little hesitant and didn't want to let her in. He was about to politely refuse because Taka and his group were inside. He knew they wouldn't harm anyone, but their appearance was terrifying, so Yuya thought someone like Kaide might faint if they saw such scary people. And then, what he feared most happened. Taka personally went to the door, asked Yuya if she was available to see guests, and informed her that they needed her to leave immediately due to a busy schedule involving work-related matters. Yuya was shocked by this unfortunate coincidence. He didn't want Taka here at all. He had intended to ask Kaide to leave, but then one of the group recognized Kaide. He asked if she was from the Hitotsuba family and was delighted to see that she was even more beautiful in real life than online. Taka asked the man if he knew the girl, and he replied that she was Hitotsuba Kaede, the most beautiful girl in Japan. Kaide chuckled softly upon hearing this, then asked Taka if that was Umichi Takashi, his real name. She even added that it would be more appropriate to call him Major Haratsu of Syndicate. Taka was slightly shocked upon hearing this, his hands trembling slightly. They all wondered how Kaide knew about Taka's relationship with the Syndicate, and even his position within it. Yuya couldn't imagine Kaide having any connection to this dark, bloody world. Meanwhile, Taka was flustered, trying to remain calm, but his face turned cold and menacing. Yuya urged Taka to calm down and stop making that face. He recalled the last time Taka gave gifts at events, just to make the children happy, but instead they were frightened by his scary expression. Yuya told himself he needed to be gentler from now on, but Taka told him things were different now. Taka approached Kaide, asking her in a forceful voice how she knew about him. He noticed she was wearing the same uniform as Yuya, meaning they attended the same school. He asked her who she really was. Kaide simply smiled, introduced herself to them, and said she didn't mind if he didn't remember her. Taka, enraged, shouted at her, telling her to forget things she shouldn't know. He warned her not to underestimate him, but Kaide was undeterred, continuing to insult Taka and calling him a single-celled organism. She even mocked Taka's tie, deeming it tacky. Yuya was stunned and worried to see Kaide dare to speak up so boldly and insult Taka. Yet she maintained a smile as if nothing had happened. Yuya understood that, although Taka was very skilled in his work, his profession was not something one could easily get involved in. Taka chuckled, then, in a menacing tone, said that Kaide's tongue was sharper than her appearance suggested. But if she weren't someone Yuya knew, he would certainly punish her severely. Taka insisted that he would only go easy on her this time. Although his eyes were brimming with tears and he looked unsteady, Taka wasn't as tough as he appeared. Yuya could understand how deeply offended he felt. Taka then regained his composure and told Yuya not to treat him like an idiot. Yuya nodded, tacitly acknowledging that he had nothing to refute. Taka then turned to Kaide, saying that she was trying to confuse him, but still hadn't answered his most important question about her identity. Kaide responded with the name Hitotsuba Yuichiru, then told Taka that he had probably heard that name before. Taka not only heard the name, but he also broke out in a cold sweat. He panicked at the mention of the name of the head of the investigation department of the National Police Agency. Taka hastily asked her if that was her father, but Kaide replied that it wasn't. Instead, Yuichiru was her uncle, who was like a father to her. She then threatened Taka, saying that if she asked her uncle for help, he would even use some of his power to do what she demanded. Taka, realizing he couldn't do anything against her, asked her what she intended to do with them. She simply replied that she wanted them to leave Yuya alone, and in return, the money Yuya's father had borrowed, including interest, totaling 36,067,977 yen, would be transferred to him later. Yuya was surprised to hear all of this. The conversation progressed from revealing that Kaide's uncle was the police chief, to her planning to pay off his father's debts. Yuya was completely bewildered by these events. Just then, a woman appeared behind Kaide and told her not to do everything alone. She politely apologized for the intrusion and introduced herself as Hitotsuba Sakurako, Kaide's mother, and also a lawyer. As soon as she arrived, she spoke to Taka in a sharp tone, addressing him by his title and warning that he might be involved in a dangerous job. Sakurako appeared calm and gentle, but her voice was as sharp as a sword, and no one could escape her authority. Yuya also sensed the pressure Taka was under at that moment. But unexpectedly, Taka spoke up and declared that he only wanted to get back the money they had lent him, The person who had fled abroad without repaying the debt was Yuya's father. So even though Yuya wasn't responsible, they had no choice but to force him to work for them. Yuya was surprised to see Taka quickly regain his composure. But then he realized it was all a performance, and that the man was genuinely terrified. Taka said it made sense for them, but in reality he was just putting on a brave face. At that point, Sakurako spoke up, saying there was no such logic and warning that Taka's money-lending business was illegal, meaning they didn't even need to charge interest. Taka retorted that if he were afraid of such warnings, he wouldn't have gotten involved in money lending. He called Sakurako a useless lawyer who couldn't do anything to him, then challenged her to try if she dared. Yuya realized that Taka was putting himself in a difficult position, and there was no doubt that his heart was pounding. Meanwhile, Taka was sweating profusely inside. Sakurako spoke up in a cute way, saying dramatic things like, "My dad is the best man in Japan." She teased Taka this way because this is exactly what his daughter usually says every day and calls her cute. She went on to say that his daughter often says that her father works hard every day for her and her mother, leaving early in the morning and coming home late at night. However, he always gives her a goodbye kiss in the morning and a goodnight kiss on the cheek, while her mother gets a kiss on the lips. Taka stood there, completely taken aback and unable to respond, as Sakurako's observations were uncannily accurate. And even more troubling was how she knew them. Kaide teased him, remarking that it was reckless to behave that way in front of a first-grade child. She wondered what his daughter might think if he continued showing affection so openly in public. Though her tone sounded concerned, there was an unspoken warning behind her words. Taka realized he couldn't do anything to them, while they could do so much to him. Yuya was also shocked to see Taka bowing his head in defeat, making him realize how truly terrifying this mother-daughter duo was. Sakurako then warned Taka, reminding him that he had told his wife he was just an ordinary employee. Taka replied that this had nothing to do with his wife or children. Sakurako immediately responded that this was exactly what she wanted to say. And similarly, Yuya had no responsibility for his father's debt and was not liable for repaying the money. Yuya didn't understand much about the law, but he felt that if his parents were causing trouble for Taka and others, then, as their child, he had to do whatever they wanted. Furthermore, Taka had always cared for and looked after him from the beginning like an older brother. Then, Sakurako stated that if Yuya didn't repay the debt, things might go wrong with Taka or his boss, which is why she pulled out a piece of paper for them to sign an agreement. Taka took the paper and read through it, then was surprised by its contents. He asked if she was lucid and what she was thinking, and then asked if she was really a lawyer. Sakurako replied that yes, she was just an ordinary lawyer, but her boss was very wealthy. Taka seemed a little confused, but eventually he agreed with Sakurako's solution and ended the matter there. He promised not to bother Yuya again, which left Yuya puzzled as to why Taka said that. He couldn't believe that the contents of the letter were enough to pay off his father's enormous debt. He felt a little scared because of this. Sakurako confirms that Yuya's father's debt has been fully paid, and even calls his father a scoundrel for his actions. Yuya wonders if she even knows his father since she speaks so casually about him. Taka also confirmed to Yuya that the money had been paid, and he was happy for Yuya that he could now live an honest life as he had wished. Yuya didn't quite understand what Taka was saying or where the conversation was leading. Then, Kaide approached and took his hand, a smile on her face. Yuya was flustered because she was so close, and she told him he could relax now and she would explain everything to him. She assured him that everything would be all right and he wouldn't have any more problems. Yuya felt relieved that he could finally breathe a sigh of relief, but he noticed that Kaide was trembling slightly. Sakurako then spoke up, saying that now was the time for the two of them to talk. She asked Taka if he would like to have tea with her, like the other colleagues in Yuya's father's group of victims. Taka refused, saying that getting involved with them would only bring unnecessary trouble. He ordered the other members of the group to leave. Before leaving, he declared to Yuya that their relationship was over. Taka suspected they would never see each other again and told Yuya to take care of himself. Yuya understood that Taka was trying to appear calm, but he knew exactly where Taka lived. Something he'd learned from Taka's wife, who had told him he could visit Rika, Taka's daughter, anytime. So he really could see Taka at any time. After everything was settled, Sakurako also left the rest to Kaide. She thanked her mother, and Sakurako apologized to Yuya for scaring him. She told him that things wouldn't be the same again. However, Yuya would still be able to live a normal student life. When she left, they were left alone. Yuya looked at Kaide and asked if anything was wrong, as he noticed she was trembling quite a bit. He asked if she was okay. She pretended not to understand and asked him what he was talking about, feigning ignorance of her trembling. She explained that it certainly wasn't because she had stood before those scary people and made herself overly anxious. It wasn't that she was as scared as before. Now that they were alone, Kaide talked more, and Yuya realized that she was genuinely afraid of Taka. He gently took her hand and said he would make her some tea while she rested a little in the living room, and then tell him everything. She agreed and decided to explain everything to him. She said that the debt his parents had left behind had been paid, but there was a condition. The condition was that Yuya would have to live with her from now on. Kaide said this with a bright smile on her face. This completely stunned Yuya. He couldn't believe that Kaide would say such a thing. He became even more bewildered when he realized that he wasn't the only one going to be killed by all the boys in school, but also by all of her fans across Japan. She said she would explain everything to him now, so they needed to go to the living room. She invited him to follow her, a bright smile glistening on her flushed face. Yuya felt happy hearing Kaide call his name with a smile like that of a goddess. So perfect it would mesmerize anyone. However, the only thing she lacked at that moment was that her legs were still trembling with fear. Afterward, they went to the living room to continue their conversation, and Kaide said she would explain Yuya's current situation. She said it could all be summarized in a few words. He is now her property. She says that's all with an innocent expression. She said there was nothing complicated about it, but after hearing that, Yuya couldn't believe it was actually an explanation. Kaide thought there was no point in giving a lengthy explanation, so she tried to keep things simple. However, Yuya said that wasn't enough. He needed further explanation about when he became her property. He asked her not to treat him like a pet she bought. Kaide giggled, blushed, and simply explained that he would be her pet from now on. She liked the way she spoke, and Yuya realized that she really didn't intend to explain further, despite saying so. She continued to smile, completely lost in her own thoughts. Even so, she looked almost illegally beautiful. She reminded him not to drink tea so noisily and apologized for teasing him too much. She then went on to explain why he had become her property, saying it was clearly because of his father. His father had come to beg her mother in tears, as he and Kaide's mother had known each other for a long time. Having attended the same elementary and middle schools like close friends with an inseparable bond, she had heard many rumors about Yuya's father, that he was a useless person. But since graduating from high school, they had never contacted each other again. A month ago, Yuya's father suddenly contacted Kaide's mother and asked for her help. At first, Kaide's mother intended to refuse because no matter how close their relationship was, Yuya's father was in trouble because of his own mistakes. Sakurako, Kaide's mother, said that Yuya's mother, who had always supported his father, also bore some responsibility for this. Yuya couldn't understand what his father was thinking and felt that when he returned from abroad, he would beat him until he was satisfied. However, Yuya's father wept and begged Sakurako for help, at least for Yuya, Sega's son. Yuya was moved by this, and Kaide went on to say that his father told him Yuya hadn't done anything wrong, and unlike him, Yuya had a lot of potential. His father didn't want Yuya's future ruined, and he said all of this with tears in his eyes. Yuya understood the situation but still wondered why Sakurako had agreed to help her father, and how this might only make things worse. Since Kaide's mother was just a stranger to him, his hasty request would be meaningless. Kaide explained that if Yuya wondered why her mother had decided to help, it was because she herself had selfishly asked her mother for help. Yuya's heart raced at the thought, making him nervous. He asked her how that could be related to helping his father, since ultimately it was someone else's problem, not his father's. She had always been an honest and well-behaved girl, never acting selfishly, and so when she asked for something for herself for the first time, her parents and grandparents were so overjoyed that they held a whole celebration. Yuya felt a little bewildered when she bluntly called him a good and honest girl, but he decided to ignore it. He thought her family must certainly lack some basic understanding, being happy that their daughter was acting selfishly for the first time. Kaide went on to tell him that she actually had two selfish requests, and the first was that she wanted to help Yuya, because it was natural since he hadn't done anything wrong. She didn't really care about his parents, but couldn't ignore his suffering because of their actions. Yuya didn't understand why Kaide cared about someone like him, and while he was extremely happy to have someone worry about him, he still had some doubts about her motives. Then, Kaide went on to tell him about her second selfish request, that he become her property. This was the most selfish request she had ever made. Regardless of his feelings, she declared that she wanted to live with him. Yuya was utterly astonished by this bombshell and completely bewildered by what was happening. He told her that this had gone too far beyond what he considered selfishness, and that being upfront with her parents about living with him was tantamount to proposing or confessing his love. Kaide was a little nervous saying it, but she still managed to tell him with a sweet expression that she wanted to be with him. Yuya felt it was unfair seeing how incredibly cute she was when she said this, like a goddess. Hearing words like that from her would surely make any man fall for her. Kaide continued to tell the rest of the story. Her father had prepared the check himself, while her mother contacted his father to handle the paperwork. Yuya opened the documents and was surprised to find a written agreement inside. It stated that Yuya's parents had agreed to let him live with Kaide and that he would be adopted into the Hitotsuba family. The agreement would officially take effect after Yuya turned 18 and graduated from high school. Furthermore, from the moment they began living together, Yuya's biological parents, Mr. and Mrs. Yoshizumi, would be completely forbidden from any contact with their son. Yuya's face turned pale when he read this. Then he shouted, "What the hell is happening to me?" Not only did he have to live with Kaide, but after graduation, they would get married and he would be adopted into the Hitotsuba family. Yuya couldn't believe his parents had actually agreed to this, but the fact they had signed the papers was the clearest proof of their consent. He even imagined how happy his mother would be, which made him feel guilty. Kaide gently reassured him, telling him not to worry because she would take care of everything for him. But knowing Yuya had a kind heart, she also knew he would feel guilty letting her take care of him. Therefore, after he was adopted into the Hitotsuba family, he would work alongside her father and eventually become the president of the Hitotsuba Corporation. This was also part of a prearranged agreement. Yuya couldn't understand what the Hitotsuba father and daughter were thinking. If his own parents had already given him a headache, the Hitotsuba family was beyond anything he could imagine. They hadn't even met him, yet they were already willing to let him marry their only daughter and make him the heir to the chairmanship of the corporation. No matter how he thought about it, it was beyond his comprehension. Kaide reiterated that his parents had approved, so he had no right to refuse. She also subtly hinted that if he dared to refuse, he could anticipate what would happen. Yuya also had a few hypothetical scenarios, such as becoming a slave under the guise of being an employee of the Hitotsuba Corporation or being banished to an underground basement, where he would never see sunlight again for the rest of his life. Just like in typical horror stories, Kaide chuckled, complimenting him on his good judgment. But she also stressed that if he truly refused, he would likely become her personal butler for life. And in that case, kissing her or doing anything bold with her would be completely impossible. Not only that, Kaide declared she would make Yuya experience a real hell, where he couldn't touch her even if she deliberately acted weak and defenseless in front of him. Yuya quickly understood her meaning, and he knew for sure that it would be a completely different kind of hell, a hell full of temptations from which he could not escape. He never thought he would one day hear Kaide say such audacious things. But no matter how strong her words were, he knew she was trying to appear tough, because her flushed face betrayed her. Immediately, Yuya's imagination ran wild at the prospect of a forbidden love with Kaide, something that, when he thought about it, wasn't bad at all. But before he could sink deeper into those thoughts, Kaide interrupted, asserting that she wouldn't allow any forbidden relationships to occur. She seemed confused, but insisted that what she truly desired was a pure and sincere love, a love more beautiful than anything else. Kaide gently asked Yuya if he too wanted to proudly express his love. Yuya was captivated by Kaide's cuteness. Although at school Kaide was known as a perfect, cold, unapproachable beauty, like a proud flower on a mountaintop. When she was with him, she was completely different. She was genuinely cute, innocent, and that seemed to be her true self. Yuya realized that if Kaide was truly like this, it meant he was one of the few people who knew her true self. Thinking about that, his heart suddenly raced. Finally, Yuya confirmed that he understood everything and decided to accept the entire deal. It wasn't that he wanted to refuse. This offer was like a gift from the gods. He would get to live with Kaide, a dream he had never dared to dream of before. The nervousness of announcing his decision made him take a sip of tea to calm himself. Thinking about living with and marrying someone as stunningly beautiful as Kaide, Yuya couldn't deny that it was a wonderful prospect. Moreover, the prospect of becoming president of the Hitotsuba Corporation awaited him. He tried to deny the feeling of loneliness in his heart, but Kaide easily sensed it. She didn't hesitate to ask him if he was hurting anywhere. Yuya was flustered by her unexpected question, and quickly replied that he wasn't in any pain at all. Kaide tilted her head, her eyes filled with concern, and asked, "If you're not in pain anywhere, then why are you crying?" Yuya froze. He hadn't realized he was crying. It felt strange that tears kept falling even though he was now free from the troubles his parents had caused. But the emotions welled up inside him, and his chest felt like it was about to burst. Yuya tried to understand why he was crying like this. At that moment, Kaide stepped forward and hugged him tightly. She gently told him it was okay, that it was perfectly normal to feel that way. She emphasized that from now on she would be by his side, always there to support him. Yuya felt vulnerable because even though the problems had been resolved, the fact that he had just been abandoned by his parents was still a difficult pain to accept. He returned Kaide's embrace, hugging her tightly and weeping on her shoulder. Kaide said nothing more, only silently comforting and soothing him. She softly whispered that loneliness was inevitable when everything happened so suddenly, but she also gave him hope for a brighter future. Kaide told him that from now on he should live happily. When Yuya stopped crying and began to calm down, Kaide gently reminded him that he should go pack his things. Yuya was shocked to learn that his house would be demolished immediately. Kaide explained that after the land was cleared, the house would be rebuilt and rented out, becoming a stable source of income for both of them. She went on to tell him that she had already prepared their dream home. She excitedly shared that tomorrow was the weekend, and they wouldn't have to go to school. Instead, they would go shopping together. Yuya still couldn't fully grasp what she had just said. As he calmed down and wiped away his tears, he felt a little uneasy, thinking that he might have inherited his father's impulsive nature. In a single moment, he had made a life-changing decision. Kaide quickly changed the subject, telling him about Hitasuba Home Appliances Corporation, where her family is headed. She mentioned that the corporation was about to celebrate its 100th anniversary, and that it was a source of pride for Japan worldwide. Hitasuba not only manufactures household appliances, but also expands its business into many other areas such as home renovation services, electric vehicles, infrastructure development, and more. With its global business scope, Hitasuba has become a leading and prestigious corporation, unmatched by anyone else. Her father, Hitasuba Kazuhiro, is the fourth-generation leader. Although the family's management system is rather old-fashioned, he always encourages overcoming difficulties through hard work. Kaide informs Yuya that everything is decided. He will follow in her father's footsteps and take over the leadership of the Hitasuba Corporation. She asked him to prepare himself, but Yuya felt like he'd just received a death sentence. He understood that integrating into society required daily effort, but asking a freshman high school student to work hard to become the president of one of the most prestigious corporations with tens of thousands of employees was simply unbelievable to him. Kaide gently suggested that he would understand better when he went to university. However, she quickly asserted that a public university would be a better fit for him, as she didn't want him wasting his time at private schools. Yuya tried to counter this, saying that if he went to university, he wouldn't be able to work alongside her father and learn from him. But Kaide quickly retorted, with a sharp look in her eyes, that he was wasting his time on pointless part-time jobs or clubs when he should be learning valuable lessons from her father. He felt as though Kaide's sharp words were piercing his heart, and he realized she had some vague thoughts about him. She squeezed his neck, whispering that he only needed to focus on her, for she knew he was a diligent man. She promised that no matter how strange his preferences were, she would fulfill all his desires. She moved closer, gently telling him that he absolutely must not do that with other girls. He felt like he was about to collapse from her mesmerizing beauty so close to him, as she winked seductively. He agreed with everything she said, but couldn't help but ask why she wanted to help him, since he thought they didn't really know each other. She nodded in agreement, admitting that they had only spoken a few times at school, but that she had been watching him for a long time. He was surprised to hear this, and she went on to say that she had watched him during after-school soccer practice. Football was one of the games he had played since he was a child, and one summer day when she happened to walk by, her eyes were drawn to him as he continued practicing diligently even after the sun had set and everyone else had gone home. She continued to watch him day after day, intently observing him kicking the ball towards the goal with an expression of unwavering determination, something he rarely showed outside of the training sessions she had witnessed. She thought he was completely different from herself, someone who could pour his heart and soul into something and dedicate himself completely. Then something interesting happened. She unexpectedly fell in love with him without even realizing it. Since that day, she has silently cheered him on, praying that his efforts would be rewarded. However, her prayers went unanswered, as his efforts seemed to go unrewarded. He sadly recalled how his dream of participating in the National League was shattered when his team was eliminated in the third round of the district tournament. His strenuous training sessions yielded no results. But what impressed her even more was that, despite the failure, Yuya didn't lose hope. The next morning, he continued playing soccer alone as usual, even though she thought he could rest a little or at least not practice alone, but he persevered and practiced diligently. She loved him for never giving up in the face of despair and for his strong heart, which made him seem truly amazing. She admitted to him that her heart had been completely captivated by him. Yuya felt a little guilty, as he wasn't as special as she thought, but she said that no matter what he said, her heart belonged to him. because she loved the way he put his heart and soul into everything he did. She decided she had to act to keep him all to herself before someone else realized his charm and stole him away. She wanted him to only look at her. As she reached out her hand near his face, he thought about how Kairi had been voted the cutest girl in Japan, which filled him with joy. He couldn't believe she was so smitten with him, a guy who played soccer like an idiot every day. Kairi had been silently watching him and falling in love with him, while he remained completely unaware of her feelings. He knew that if asked if he liked her, he would say he didn't know. He helped her sit down and said that he understood her feelings and that he was genuinely happy to receive a declaration of love from such a beautiful girl. But he also said that he didn't know much about her, so he couldn't reciprocate her feelings right now. Kairi listened to him and said it was all right. She had anticipated this. She understood that beyond her appearance, he didn't truly know her, so it was okay if he couldn't answer immediately. She was delighted with his response, and it made her feelings for him soar. He realized that while appearance was important, understanding each other's true selves was even more crucial. At the very least, his criteria were that they should have enjoyable moments together, and more importantly, whether they truly cared about and understood him for who he was inside. Relationships based solely on appearances often fall apart quickly, and he didn't want to be in that situation. Kaide chuckled, saying that although her methods were a bit forceful, they had succeeded in breaking down the barriers between them. She knew he couldn't understand yet, but she still dreamed that one day he might say, "I love you," and kiss her like that. However, as she became lost in her fantasies, the image of Kaide in his mind, a precious beauty, was shattered. However, he felt relieved that he could finally understand her a little better. He told her that there was actually a significant difference between how she behaved at school and at home. Kaide pointed at his face and said that everyone wears a mask, and that applied to him as well. She went on to say that whether he did it unconsciously or not, Yuya at home and Yuya playing soccer looked like two completely different people. Then she asked him in those two personas, which was the pretense and which was his true self. He thought for a moment and replied that both had their own positive qualities. He couldn't jump to conclusions about her true nature as he didn't know much about her beforehand. However, based on what she had shared with him so far, they could gradually understand each other better. Kaide was gentle and calm, a wonderful, elegant, and trustworthy girl. However, alongside that, she also had a cute side, always laughing, lost in her fantasies, sometimes making silly faces, blushing and feeling shy. Those moments of hers were truly adorable. Hearing him say that, she was delighted and replied that she also wanted to learn more about him, such as his favorite food, the type of girl he liked, his quirky hobbies and favorite situations, and much more. She said they should try their best and whispered something in his ear. However, he stopped her, placed his finger on her lips, and said that they should leave that for later, and instead get to know each other better first. She dropped a bomb on him the moment he started to feel a little defensive. He thought he'd never be able to catch up with her because every action of hers was unexpected and delightful. She said it with a blushing face, turning away slightly, which only made him feel awkward because of her cuteness. To him, everything about Kairi was unpredictable, leaving him unable to stop doubting her. He told her that they had had enough of the joking and it was time to start packing. She said they only needed to take the bare minimum and then they would leave. He asked her where they were moving to, and she clearly replied that they would be moving into their love nest. He was completely astonished to realize that they would actually be living together under one roof from that day onward. Then, around 9 p.m., they got into a luxurious imported car, seemingly heading somewhere. The owner of the car was none other than Kaide, sitting beside him. Her face was completely different from before. She looked so elegant and beautiful that he couldn't help but admire her, but he was too shy to admit it. He asked her where the car was going or where she was taking him, and she reminded him that they were on their way to their love nest, where her father had made sure to choose the most beautiful room of all for them. He no longer doubted her, but still asked if what she said was true. Earlier, she had made a cute, deliberately naive expression which only confused him further. He couldn't help but sigh as he looked out the window. They were in the famous Bay Area, a place with many luxury apartments like first-class hotels. He looked outside and saw an area completely out of reach of high school students. She was pleased to see how familiar he was with it and considered it a necessary skill for anyone in society. He remembered his father, who always sat watching TV and forgot all the latest trends, while he only read the news during breaks between football training sessions, so he couldn't be sure he knew much. She told him that if he could do that now, his future would be fine. This would also help him a lot when working under her father. She reassured him that there was nothing to worry about because she trusted him. He felt embarrassed by her compliments, quickly looking away to hide his blushing face. She said he looked cute when he blushed, and while they chatted, they arrived at their destination. She announced that this would be their new home. He was stunned when he saw the building. It was as luxurious as the one he had just seen in the car. He couldn't believe he'd be living in a place like this with Katie. She said their apartment was on the top floor. She walked closer, put her arm around his, and said they should go. He felt very nervous, struggling not to faint from her closeness. They entered the elevator. He had intended to carry his own luggage up, but the driver stopped him, saying it was his job and asking him not to jeopardize his employment. He was alone with her in the elevator, feeling nervous while she seemed very happy. She leaned on his shoulder, and a moment later they reached their floor. The moment he stepped inside, he couldn't believe how spacious it was. Everything was luxurious, with high-end furniture, and the space was impeccably clean. She smiled and asked if he liked it, to which he replied by asking if they would actually live there. She nodded, confirming that it was a truth he had to accept, and that everything would be all right because she was a great cook. She said she would cook anything he wanted. Yuya could cook too, but they decided to take turns cooking, or even follow a fixed schedule. He knew that everything shouldn't depend on just one person, so he glanced around the house again. Even the living room and dining room were incredibly spacious. The dining table and chairs were elegantly designed, and the sofa was far too big for two people. The TV in the room was also very large, but the highlight was the view outside the window, which made the space even more spectacular. With the magnificent night view and twinkling lights of the bay streaming through the large windows, he began to fantasize about putting his arm around her shoulder and gently squeezing her, then giving her a passionate kiss, and perhaps going even further. But he stopped immediately, feeling embarrassed and covering his face with his hands, trying to hide his thoughts. She noticed his face was red and asked why. He said nothing and assured her that he wasn't having any strange thoughts. He clearly stated that they needed to understand each other better before doing anything. And until then, a sexual relationship was absolutely out of the question. She chuckled softly at his embarrassment, then told him he was quite a strange person. She liked his polite demeanor. This only increased his anxiety. Such praise only made him more flustered, and he didn't want her to continue praising him. Otherwise, he might not be able to sleep. He feared he wouldn't be able to live up to her expectations. Then she told him they should have dinner now and clapped her hands. Immediately, there was a knock on the door. She checked the door camera and confirmed it was Mr. Sturvin outside. She opened the door to retrieve her luggage, and both pizzas would be their dinner. She smiled and asked if he wanted to eat them right away before they got cold. He watched her holding the two pizzas and realized the driver must have gone to get them. She thanked Miyamoto, their driver, and asked if he'd like to join them for dinner, as he might not have had dinner yet. Miyamoto replied that it was fine. His work was finished, and he didn't want to disturb them. Then he bowed and left. Yuya was impressed by Miyamoto's discipline. He had mostly gray hair and called himself an old soldier, but his posture was straight, and his voice was full of vitality, showing no signs of old age. His appearance only added to his elegance, and in Yuya's eyes, he was a true senior gentleman. She listened to him and explained that Miyamoto had been a professional driver since her grandfather's time, so it wasn't an exaggeration to say he was like a member of their family. Miyamoto also knew his limits in this matter. Then they decided to eat the pizza before it got cold. He didn't need to ask when she ordered the pizza. It was definitely delicious at the time. While he was getting ready, he even saw the side dishes that went with the pizza. What surprised him was that a beauty like Katie could enjoy fast food so happily. She was pleased to hear his comment, and said that this was yet another thing he knew about her. He realized that you can't judge a person by their appearance alone, and the public image people had of Kaide was actually just a facade. She was just an ordinary girl in high school. She hoped they would get along and gave him a can of cola. He took it, feeling relaxed. When he opened the can of cola, the soda splashed all over his face, making her laugh out loud because it turned out she had played a prank on him. He realized something else about her but felt foolish for being so easily teased. He realized that Kaide was also a playful person, despite her innocent appearance. After dinner, he felt full and decided it was time to take a shower. He asked her if it was okay if he took a shower now. She replied that gas, electricity, and water were all ready, so he could use everything without any problems. He thought he might explore the house a bit before going to the bathroom, so he checked all the rooms. However, when he entered the bedroom, it caught his attention the most. The bedroom had a king-size bed with 2 pillows and a duvet, looking like a room for lovers. But he thought that since there was still some time before bedtime, he would leave the bed for later and go take a shower instead. He stepped into the bathroom, and like other areas of the house, it was quite spacious. Then he realized the bathtub was very large, big enough for 2 people to comfortably stretch their legs while sitting in it. which made him think they could absolutely bathe together if he wanted to. But that wouldn't be good. And just thinking about it made him feel things he shouldn't be feeling right now. He felt embarrassed and thought it was only a matter of time before he lost his mind, as if it would fly out the window. Whether they showered together or not, he couldn't control his fantasies, especially as a high school student living with an amazing girl like Katie. Suddenly, she appeared behind him and said that she wouldn't mind if some mistakes happened between them. Her words surprised him, and she said she would sincerely welcome anything. Before he could fully understand, he noticed she was standing right behind him, arms crossed and a serious expression on her face. But her legs were trembling slightly. He sensed that despite her words, she was actually very worried. He replied that he couldn't do such things with a girl without genuine feelings. He believed that only two people in love could do such things. She said she hadn't said anything yet, but would be happy if he felt the same way. She admitted that she wouldn't retract her words about welcoming him, and that he might remember that. She always said things that made his heart race, words that could make him love her even more. He sighed and looked at her, certain that something was bound to happen between them, but he wanted to restrain those feelings a little because he wanted to get to know her better first. She asked him if he planned to shower alone, and he replied that saying things like showering together didn't make sense if she was clearly feeling anxious about it. She was slightly surprised that he noticed and quickly turned away, trying to deny it. She said it might be because his eyes were moving and that she was perfectly normal. He laughed at her attempt to deny it. While he quickly prepared to take a shower, he pushed her out, telling her she could watch TV while he showered alone. He instructed her not to peek, but she seemed to be imagining something else. In her mind, upon hearing this, she wondered if it was something to peek at when he had said no, and for some reason, she thought it was a sign to secretly watch him. He found her insistence a little strange, while she told him he should be more honest with her if he really wanted her to peek. Seeing that she wouldn't listen, he realized that usually it's the boys who want to peek at the girls, but here it was completely the opposite. He thought that normally she should be the one asking him not to peek at her, but she said she would be very happy if he did. He wanted her to do exactly as she said, because she was currently making him very confused. He also felt embarrassed being asked that question, and she looked very cute. Finally, he said he understood and would peek at her whenever he had the chance, adding that he didn't like being peeked at and asked her to leave. She pouted, unable to peek at him. He went to get his clothes to change into after his shower, and when he turned around and looked at the TV and other appliances, he realized some things were missing, such as a washing machine or a refrigerator, along with everyday utensils. There were knives but no forks. He tried to think of what he should do now. Then she came closer and reminded him that she had said she would go shopping tomorrow. She said they would buy things like dishes in the morning, and then appliances like a washing machine and refrigerator. Although she could afford these things herself, she decided not to. He understood that a married couple or a newlywed couple would go shopping together, but high school student shopping seemed a bit strange, not to mention where the money would come from. He asked her about it, and she said she might have borrowed things from her father since her family owned a manufacturing company. But she said her father wanted them to shop for themselves and decide what they wanted to buy. She agreed and asked him if it was okay. He knew that even though she asked, he actually had no other choice, as he would probably be forced to agree with her idea. He also somewhat wanted to buy those items himself, so he agreed to go shopping with her. She was delighted to hear him say that choosing household items would be fun. She agreed with him, and since they would be living together from now on, she wanted to choose items that they both approved of. This made her smile, eagerly anticipating tomorrow. He also smiled, seeing Kaida's simplicity and kindness. It all felt like a dream to him. He recalled everything that had happened in a single day. His useless father getting into debt and running away abroad, him almost being captured and forced into servitude to Taka. But then she saved him. Finally, he had to live with her and marry her against his will. And now they had moved into a new apartment, and tomorrow they would go on a shopping date to buy everyday necessities. When the bathroom was ready, Kaidi stood behind him and suggested they take a shower, offering to rub his back. He glared at her for trying to trick him so naturally and told her that even though she was comfortable with it, she still felt embarrassed around him. He asked her to stay quietly outside the bathroom. But as soon as he got into the bathtub, she followed him and tried to open the door. He had locked it first. She kept asking if he needed her in, but he didn't know what to do at the moment, so he just remained silent. He didn't know how long he could endure her, or perhaps he was already starting to feel comfortable around her. He wondered about this as he slowly soaked in the warm water. While thinking, he began to worry about the next bedroom situation. After a while, she asked why he was so insistent on sleeping alone. He turned away, avoiding her gaze, knowing that this issue would have to be faced sooner or later. He recalled her taking a shower while he relaxed in the living room, watching videos. But she kept calling Yuga's name teasingly and asking if he wanted to peek at her, since her room door was always unlocked. He tried not to pay attention to it, and while showering, he thought a lot about the bedroom issue. He couldn't think of a solution, realizing that it was quite a complicated problem, much like politics. He told her he wasn't the playboy type, didn't want to sleep with a girl, so he'd sleep on the sofa in the living room. But she flatly refused, making an angry face and saying he'd been a playboy enough and should sleep with her. She angrily asked him why he insisted on sleeping on the sofa when they had a soft, comfortable bed big enough for two. She said that if they started living together under one roof and slept separately, she would cry. And so, they sat at opposite ends of the bed, arguing about it. She looked beautiful, freshly showered, her flushed face adding to her charm. He thought that if he got any closer, he might not be able to stop himself, and unimaginable things would happen between them. He would sleep on the luxurious bed, but thought it inappropriate for a man and a woman who weren't in a romantic relationship to suddenly share a bed. He made it clear to Katie that even if she were comfortable with it, he couldn't agree. She asked why, and after thinking it over, he understood that she thought he was worried he would attack her while she was asleep. She asked if he understood correctly, and he was surprised to see her say it with such a cheerful expression. He couldn't remain calm either when she got so close to him, and taken aback, he slipped out of bed. She asked if he was okay, and he said he was fine and asked her not to come any closer. He said if she came any closer, he might go crazy. Her scent was subtly citrusy. He wondered if she knew he liked it, and if so, she must be a brilliant strategist. The scent of her shampoo and body soap blended together perfectly. If he couldn't control himself, he would surely hug her tightly right then and there. She smiled and said it was fine if he hugged and sniffed her like a puppy. Even though she felt a little embarrassed, she would hug him tightly and comfort him. He asked her how she knew what he was thinking, and she said that she could always see through him. She said that just by looking at his face, she could easily discern his emotions. He blushed when he realized his face was so easily readable and quickly covered it, feeling very embarrassed. Nevertheless, he tried his best not to let his emotions get the better of him. He was determined not to give in, and seeing him struggle like that, she understood his feelings. She said that she had intended to hold him while they slept, but now she would let it go, seeing him like that. However, she set one condition. He had to sleep in the same bed as her, because if he slept in another room, he might catch a cold. She said he was free to do so unless he had a particular preference for nurses, emphasizing that she would become his nurse if he fell asleep, which would only make things more complicated for him. She thought that was fine, then began to think and get lost in her fantasies again, a smile spreading across her face. Then she teased him, saying she would wipe his sweat, telling him to take off his clothes and obey her. Annoyed, he lightly hit her and yelled, telling her not to have such indecent fantasies. She immediately turned around and said she had a great idea, and he was terrible for not letting her continue. So she decided to punish him by making him sleep with her. Yuga told her she couldn't be so unreasonable. She approached him, her face full of anger. Finally, he admitted defeat, agreeing to sleep in the same bed with her, but keeping his distance. He wasn't a fussy sleeper or someone who liked to cuddle, so he thought it would be fine. But if anything happened, he'd be in trouble. She said she was a fussy sleeper and liked to cuddle, but she would sleep soundly, and if anything did happen, she hoped he would forgive her. He replied that he would throw her out of bed as mercilessly as possible, and told her to remember that. She was amused by his answer and said that he was special for being able to throw her out of bed like that. She smiled brightly and looked at him, while he looked away in embarrassment. The way she always spoke those words so naturally made him blush, and he thought the word like sounded too gentle to her. She said that only she, besides her family, had ever told him that she liked him and asked him never to take it lightly. He understood and immediately turned to sleep on his side. She smiled at him and said she would dry her hair before going to bed and wished him good night. He replied, but despite his anxiety, he couldn't sleep. Even though the sound of her hairdryer was so quiet it was almost inaudible, he still found it incredibly noisy. After a while, the sound of the hairdryer stopped as Kari returned to bed, quietly and without a sound, and quickly drifted off to sleep. Her breathing was so sweet to him, and he began to feel relaxed. His eyes slowly closed as he listened to her breathing. He realized he must be very tired, as it had been a long time since he had slept so soundly. While he was sleeping, he dreamed that he was standing still, and his parents were standing in front of him. They said this was where they had to say goodbye to him and told him to take good care of himself. He tried to stop them by reaching out his hand, trying to tell them that he wanted to go with them too. Suddenly, his sleep was interrupted. He realized he was raising his arms, breathing heavily, and then he realized it was just a dream. He quickly jumped out of bed. Kaide was still sleeping soundly beside him. He walked out of the bedroom and into the living room, still feeling disoriented by the dream. The heavy feeling in his heart couldn't be shaken off, even though he was now living a good life. But he still couldn't get over the painful truth that his parents had abandoned him. However, Kaide saved him, giving him a new life, and they lived together. Although he didn't realize it, this was something he knew would never disappear. Just like his parents, there were times of joy and sorrow, but no matter what, he always thought he would be there for them. But they passed away without him. He felt weak and knelt down, tears streaming down his face, unable to understand why they hadn't taken him along. He missed his parents terribly and began to sob uncontrollably. He cried for a long time. Then, as he was wiping away his tears, he heard his name called. Kaide's voice rang out as if she were standing right behind him. But when he turned around, he realized Kaide wasn't there. He wondered if he was imagining things because it was impossible for Kaide to have woken up when she was still fast asleep. He recalled her gentleness, her constant smile whenever she was with him. That feeling made him feel more at ease, and then he returned to the bedroom, careful not to make any noise. Upon entering, he was surprised to see a strange sight. Kaide was asleep and smiling. Even stranger, she was lying on the side where he had been sleeping earlier. He was certain she had been lying on the opposite side earlier, and he couldn't understand why she was now beside him. He thought she might have just turned over in her sleep and realized there was no point in overthinking it. So he simply lay down where she had been. He dismissed all thoughts as he slid into bed, feeling his face sink into the pillow. Kaide's fresh scent and the lingering warmth from her made him feel comfortable. If he could, he wouldn't want to leave this warmth. He closed his eyes, thought of her, and drifted off to sleep soundly all night. He woke up and found Kaide still sleeping soundly beside him, which made him feel quite awkward. He couldn't go back to sleep because of her closeness. Kaide slept soundly, but he was still groggy from lack of sleep. At times like these, all he could do was find a hot bath to wake himself up. While the bathwater was being prepared, he sat in the living room, feeling listless. His eyes landed on the gaming console with its controller and the brand new 4K TV. He smiled and thought about playing a game, but then she felt she couldn't do that. If he happily played alone, Kaide would surely feel lonely watching him play without her. He wondered if, when his partner was doing something fun without him, he would surely feel lonely too. Thinking this, he decided to stop playing games. He stood up, knowing he couldn't play without her by his side. He realized the house didn't have a refrigerator and wondered how he was going to make breakfast. Suddenly, Miyamoto appeared, wishing him a good morning. He didn't know where Miyamoto had come from, then quickly noticed that Miyamoto was carrying 2 bags from a familiar hamburger chain. Yuya asked if Miyamoto bought them for Kaide and himself, and Miyamoto nodded in confirmation. He wondered if Miyamoto could read his mind, then questioned why hamburgers, a rather heavy breakfast item. Miyamoto explained that it was a direct request from Kaide. It turned out she had asked him to bring back those hamburgers for breakfast. He was amazed by Kaide's incredibly thoughtful planning, but couldn't help thinking that eating pizza for dinner and hamburgers for breakfast wasn't a good idea at all. He wondered if Kaide really liked fast food that much. His unease increased when he remembered she had promised to cook for him tomorrow. Miyamoto reassured him, saying that Kaide's cooking was a bit haphazard, but the quality was guaranteed. Meanwhile, Kaide and Yuya were having breakfast together. She excitedly asked Yuya where he wanted to go first thing in the day. She went on to say she thought they should check out some tableware first, then some household goods. Yuya was still chewing his food, prompting Kaide to ask for his opinion again. Receiving no answer, Kaide turned to Yuya, asking if he was still angry with her for barging into the bathroom unexpectedly the day before. Yuya still didn't respond, prompting Kaide to promise not to do it again and advise him to relax. However, Kaide's way of speaking didn't really reassure Yuya, so she'll probably do it again in the future. She added that next time she'll do it properly, in bed as Yuya desires, and asked for his forgiveness. Finally, she let out a playful meow. However, Yuya remained unimpressed. He continued to frown and ignore Kaide. Finally, Yuya spoke, though his voice was hesitant, saying he would make an exception and forgive her this time. But only this one time. He warned that if she did the same thing again, he would truly never speak to her again. Yuya insisted that he wouldn't speak to her for 3 hours. Instead of feeling worried, Kaide simply smiled and said that Yuya was adorable and that she liked this aspect of his personality. Yuya responded with a slight smirk. Then Kaide reminded him that they had finished breakfast, so Yuya should quickly get dressed, as Miyamoto was about to pick them up for shopping. Yuya agreed and began getting ready. While getting ready, Yuya muttered to himself that getting ready didn't take much time. Just put on an outfit, quickly fix his hair, and wait. But he wanted to adjust his hair a little, just to look better standing next to a goddess like Kaide. He was completely unaware that Kaide had been quietly listening all along. She gently told him not to worry, that he was wonderful just the way he was. Kaide added that what she valued most was his heart. His appearance was secondary to her. She advised Yuya not to pay attention to what others said. Yuya was stunned by Kaide's sincere words. He didn't know how to respond, only feeling a sense of calm in his heart. After they both finished getting ready, Miyamoto came to pick them up, and the group went to the store as planned. They began browsing the household appliances. Yuya recounted that after lunch and a light snack, they stopped by an electronics store to buy a set of household appliances, including a refrigerator. He said that the selection process was more difficult than they had anticipated. Yuya mentioned that Kaide remembered seeing a thin, bespectacled employee on television, described as very knowledgeable and professional. Upon arriving at the store, Kaide encountered a similar-looking female employee and struck up a conversation with her. Yuya also noted that this employee didn't seem bothered that both Kaide and he were high school students. The employee listened carefully to their needs and desires regarding the equipment, then suggested products that suited their requirements. Her advice was engaging, and her words instilled confidence. She even offered them a discount, demonstrating friendliness and enthusiasm. What impressed Yuya the most was that the more they listened to the saleswoman's advice, the more they decided to choose appliances from Hitotsuba Electric, a world-class brand. Yuya also emphasized that it was perfectly understandable. Kaide had paid the full amount for the items they decided to buy with cash. Kaide explained that her father had given her a sum of money to use, but she had to report the details of the household appliances she had purchased. Kaide also told the female employee that she would mention her name in the report and requested a business card. The employee, though a little nervous, was extremely excited and agreed immediately. Kaide thanked the saleswoman, saying that thanks to her attentive advice, she had a wonderful shopping experience that day. She also promised to tell her father about the saleswoman's professionalism. Hearing this, the saleswoman bowed respectfully. Later, that young woman rose through the ranks, reaching a managerial position in her career. After finishing her shopping, Kaide looked at the time on her phone and realized it was 7:20 p.m. She said that time was passing faster than she expected. Then Kaide suggested to Yuya that they should go home for dinner. Yuya agreed and offered to cook something, like pasta, if Kaide was okay with it. Kaide, wanting to be sure of what she heard, asked Yuya if he was really going to cook himself. Yuya confirmed, adding that while he was also looking forward to enjoying a meal cooked by Kaide, it didn't necessarily have to be today. He emphasized that they would have many other opportunities in the future. Kaide excitedly agreed, declaring that she would show off her cooking skills tomorrow and telling Yuya to get ready. After agreeing, Yuya reminded Kaide to hurry so they could meet Miyamoto and go to the supermarket together. Kaide agreed, excitedly saying that she couldn't wait to try Yuya's cooking. At home, Kaide tried the Italian pasta that Yuya had cooked. She praised the food, even jokingly asking if Yuya was a genius. Yuya laughed, replying that if he were a genius, then all the chefs in the world were idiots, and he couldn't imagine what Michelin-starred chefs would be like. Kaide wouldn't give up, saying she wouldn't let him outsmart her, and telling Yuya to look forward to tomorrow. She even promised to cook his favorite dish. Yuya asked how she knew what he liked, and Kaide confidently replied that she knew perfectly well. Kaide then confidently asserted that Yuya's favorite food was hamburger steak. She continued, saying that although Yuya usually ate pastries on days when the school cafeteria served hamburger steak, he always chose it. She asked Yuya if she had guessed wrong. Despite Kaide's confident expression, Yuya simply nodded, acknowledging that she was right and that she knew a great deal about him. Kaide smiled triumphantly, saying she knew everything about him, from his likes and dislikes to even the lively conversations he had with his friends. She proudly declared that she understood everything about him. Then, unexpectedly, Kaide changed the subject, asking Yuya about his current interests, suggesting he was obsessed with a newly released fantasy game. She went on to comment that he seemed to really like his childhood friend in the game, a character she described as extremely attractive. Then, with a mischievous grin, she directly asked if it was the girl with the enormous breasts. This unexpected question, combined with what Kaide had just said, left Yuya speechless. While they were drinking tea, the atmosphere suddenly changed. Kaide became serious, her deep gaze fixed on Yuya. She said she had something to ask him. Noticing her seriousness, Yuya replied that he would try to answer anything he could. Kaide said she would ask without hesitation, then took a deep breath and began to ask, maintaining her serious expression. She asked Yuya if he liked girls like the female characters in the game, who had large breasts. Yuya seemed surprised by her question. Kaide went on to explain that she herself thought she had a large bust and didn't feel inferior to anyone. Then, she asked Yuya if she was unattractive. and even mentioned that she had been voted the most beautiful girl in her Japanese high school that day. She covered her face with both hands, feeling uneasy. Yuya, noticing Kaide's anxiety, said that he was one of her admirers. He thought she was really cool, strong, yet mischievous and talkative. He even complimented her, saying everything she did was cute, including how she always tried to seduce him whenever she had the chance, then blushed like a lovely peony. He said her actions were beyond his comprehension. Yuya also emphasized that when a girl like Kaide says he can do anything to her, it's hard for an ordinary person to resist that attraction. Yuya told Kaide that all men like girls with big breasts and warned her that she was joking too much. He said that she would actually attract him if she continued like that, but Kaide didn't feel threatened or scared. She simply replied that if it were him, she would actually agree. She added that once Yuya really liked her, she wouldn't have it easy on him either. Yuya, somewhat surprised, asked Kaide what would happen if she truly gave her all. Kaide replied that if she did that, she wouldn't let him sleep all night, and told him to just leave it at that. Hearing this, Yuya hurriedly ran back to his room and burrowed under the covers. Kaide muttered to herself that he had escaped again this time. The next morning, Yuya woke up and got ready for the day. He put on his uniform and prepared lunch for both of them. Looking at the clock, he saw it was 6:32. Time to wake Kaide up. Recalling last night, Kaide came to Yuya's room and said they would go to school together the next day. Yuya lay in bed, his eyes closed. Kaide explained that since they lived together, going to school together was a given. She said it would be like having a childhood friend living next door wake him up every morning. Yuya thought to himself that wouldn't be like that because such a world didn't exist in reality. And even if it did, the possibility was almost impossible. Yuya told Kaide that going to school together would be troublesome because Kaide was so beautiful that she was voted the most beautiful girl in Japan's high school. Yuya worried that if people saw her going to school with a boy, a panic would break out. However, Kaide didn't see any problem with that. She said that since they were living together, she would consider it an opportunity to brag. Yuya asked her what she intended to brag about and to whom. Kaide replied that she would show everyone that Yuya was her boyfriend and that she wouldn't give anyone a chance to take him away. Kaide's words surprised Yuya. His face turned red, and Kaide noticed it. She said that Yuya had blushed like a peony, truly a shy boy. Yuya turned his back, replying that no matter what Kaide said, he wouldn't go to school with her. In fact, he couldn't, as he said he didn't want to die young. However, Yuya said that if she wanted to go to school with him, she'd have to wake herself up in the morning, as he wouldn't wake her up. Kaide exclaimed, pulling Yuya's blanket and reproaching him for being cruel. She said they had slept together on a futon, so she asked him to wake her up, as she knew she wasn't one to get up early. Yuya replied that he knew, but she should have woken up herself. It turned out Yuya had woken up early that day just to avoid going to school with Kaide, but if he let her sleep any longer, she would be late for school. Yuya seemed to have a little conscience left. He went into the room to check if Kaide was still asleep and asked if she had woken up. Kaide was slowly waking up, still groggy. Yuya reminded her that if she didn't get up quickly, she would be late, then gently patted her shoulder. Kaide, still half asleep, said she would get dressed, but then she raised her hand to Yuya and asked him to help her change clothes. Yuya was astonished. I was surprised by her reaction because she did so quickly even though she wasn't fully awake yet. Kaide then ordered Yuya to help her change clothes, otherwise she would be late for school, and asked him if he was okay with that. Yuya realized that Kaide was doing this intentionally. She was teasing him because he noticed her dreamy eyes suddenly light up, and a mischievous smile spread across her lips. Yuya thought to himself that this was really annoying, although he didn't mind her teasing. But if she continued like this, he would return the favor twofold. Yuya took Kaide's hand and said he would help her change, asking her to raise her hand. Kaide was surprised, her face flushed, but she still said okay with a nervous expression. Yuya began undressing her, despite feeling very nervous. He told himself there was nothing to worry about. Just quickly undress and turn away immediately. That way, he would maintain his composure. When Yuya had finished taking off Kaide's shirt, he was surprised to discover that she wasn't wearing anything under her pajamas. Unexpectedly, Kaide hugged Yuya tightly and asked him why he was staring at her, calling him a pervert. Yuya, surprised, asked why she wasn't wearing anything underneath, even though he had just taken off her shirt. Kaide just laughed and said that she didn't wear underwear when she slept. Yuya thought that if he had known beforehand, he wouldn't have helped Kaide undress. Kaide asked if he was surprised by her prank, a satisfied smile spreading across her face. Yuya realized this and thought that her expression was the innocent face of someone seeking praise after successfully pulling off a prank. However, Yuya felt uncomfortable letting her continue to tease him like that. He told Kaide that he was genuinely surprised, but also warned her that if she went too far, he would eat her. Kaide nodded in agreement and said that she would be more careful. Yuya then announced that he was going to school and reminded her not to be late. Even though the day had only just begun, Yuya already felt tired. On the way to school, his close friend Shinji greeted him and asked if anything was wrong, as he looked more tired than usual. Yuya and Shinji played together on the soccer team, and Shinji was his irreplaceable partner on the field. Shinji was quite small for a soccer player, but his creative passes always fit Yuya's instincts perfectly. Shinji's gentle appearance and friendly personality made him very popular with the girls. Many girls at school confessed their feelings to him, but Shinji rejected them all and instead confessed to a girl he fell in love with at first sight. The two became a popular couple at school, always attracting the attention of their classmates. Yuya greeted Shinji and replied that a lot had been happening lately. Then, another person joined their conversation, Nikaido, who noticed that despite Yuya's troubles, he still wore a smug smile. Nikaido was another close friend of Yuya's. Nikaido is also a prominent figure in the school, comparable to the reputation of Kaede Hitotsuba's family. She's the star of the basketball club, despite being only a freshman. She has a handsome appearance with delicate features and a stylish pixie haircut. Her husky voice has made Nikaido a beloved idol among many girls, earning her the nickname Prince of Meiwadai. Even Yuya, a boy, had to admit that Nikaido was very handsome. Besides, Nikaido was an excellent student with exceptionally high grades. She was so perfect that she could be called a true prince. Yuya greeted Nikaido and told her that he was just feeling mentally exhausted. Nikaido advised him that no matter how tired he was, he should relax a little. Otherwise, she would feel sad if Yuya continued like that. Shinji, standing nearby, also agreed with Nikaido's opinion. In class, Yuya sat next to Nikaido and asked her what she was doing. Nikaido was reading a short story from Full Metal Panic. She said that even though she had read it many times, it was still very interesting and recommended that Yuya try reading it. Yuya explained that the reason he and Nikaido started talking and became close was because they shared similar interests. When Yuya first started school, he found Nikaido sitting next to him, also reading a light novel he enjoyed. They started talking more because they shared a common interest in anime. Shinji came to their table and asked Yuya again why he felt mentally exhausted. Nikaido also suggested that Yuya shouldn't make a big deal out of it and just share his feelings with them. Then Yuya asked them about Kaede Hitotsuba. Both Nikaido and Shinji were surprised to hear Yuya ask about Kaede, as they were certain he already knew about her. However, Yuya persisted in asking. Nikaido said that Kaede is a perfect girl, she has excellent academic achievements, and is also very good at sports. Furthermore, she is a huge influencer on social media, with every photo or video she posts going viral. Nikaido also said that during the National High School Girl Beauty Pageant, many major production companies approached Kaede, but she rejected them all. The reason was that her dream was simply to become an ordinary wife, which made her even more attractive. Kaede shared this in an interview after winning the Grand Prix. Nikaido said that the gods truly loved Kaede. When Yuya asked about his opinion of Kaede, Shinji didn't have much to say because Nikaido had already said almost everything. Shinji only said that Kaede was very popular, and it seemed that many seniors and classmates had confessed their feelings to her, but he heard that Kaede had rejected them all. In fact, Shinji had also heard rumors that she already had someone in her heart, and that person was truly a lucky man. When Yuya asked Shinji where he got this information, Shinji simply replied that he had overheard people talking about it, so he couldn't be sure. Then Nikaido asked Yuya if he thought that person was him. But Yuya immediately denied it, saying that Kaede was someone out of his reach. Nikaido told him that instead of eyeing those high-minded girls, he should pay attention to more approachable girls, adding that no guy in the school was worthy of Kaede. Yuya completely agreed with her. The school bell rang, signaling lunchtime, and as Yuya stepped into the cafeteria, a sudden storm disrupted his peaceful days. A female student rushed up to him and asked if Kaede had confessed her feelings. That girl was Utsuki. Yuya was surprised and quickly asked her who had said that. Utsuki replied that Kaede had told her. She said that Kaede had said the day before that she would confess her feelings to Yuya, but hadn't heard the result yet. Utsuki recounted that when she asked Kaede about it, Kaede just smiled and didn't say anything more. Therefore, Utsuki thought she should ask Yuya directly. Shinji then tapped Utsuki on the head and reminded her to be mindful of her surroundings when asking such sensitive questions. He then pointed at Yuya, whose face had turned pale. However, Yuya reassured him that it was nothing serious. Utsuki asked Shinji if he didn't want to ask Yuya directly, and Shinji admitted he was genuinely curious about it. He said he now understood why Yuya had asked that question this morning. Hearing this, Utsuki became even more curious and asked Yuya to reveal what he had asked Shinji. Utsuki is the girl Shinji fell in love with at first sight when they first started school. She's also Kaide's classmate. Yuya accuses Utsuki of feigning innocence when she's the one who caused the trouble, and now she's trying to tease him. Utsuki immediately replied that she didn't want to hear such words from the person who had officially made Kaide smile the brightest she'd seen all morning. Shinji admitted he was genuinely curious to know what Kaide looked like when she smiled happily. Utsuki said she had prepared a perfect photo of Kaide just in case that happened. Then she teased Yuya, asking if he wanted to see it. Deep down, Yuya admitted that he really wanted to know what Kaide's happy smile looked like, but he felt it would be admitting defeat if he had to ask her. At this point, Nikaido asked Yuya about the question Utsuki had asked him earlier. Whether Kaide had truly confessed her feelings to him, Yuya wasn't sure how to answer. Meanwhile, Utsuki continued to pester him about Kaide's photo, saying it was a very precious picture, capturing Kaide's dreamy smile and asking if he was calm, since he might see it any time in the future when he was Kaide's boyfriend. Annoyed, Yuya asks Shinji what's going on with his girlfriend, but then he feels curious to see Kaide's dreamy smile. Suddenly, Kaide's voice rang out from the crowd, telling Yuya he should have told her sooner that she was ready to give herself completely to him, and that if he wished, he could enjoy her body tonight. She said that if he did, he would get to see her dreamy smile. At that moment, Yuya called out Kaide's name, interrupting her and reminding her that she shouldn't say such things at school, especially in the middle of class. Kaide only responded with a sweet smile. She called Yuya my darling and asked if there was a problem with her only visiting him because she felt lonely and couldn't see him until noon. Yuya started to panic, asking Kaide to calm down a bit. He told her that he wasn't her boyfriend, as he hadn't yet reciprocated her confession. He also admitted that he liked her, but with a little shyness. Kaide said she understood, and if he said so, then he'd better get ready. Then she offered him the lunchbox Yuya had prepared earlier and asked him to eat. Utsuki unexpectedly interrupted the conversation, saying that lunchtime was almost over, and if they continued wasting time, Yuya should prepare himself for a lot of questions. As Shinji and Utsuki left, Utsuki declared that she would get revenge for always being called lovebirds. And when they were out of sight, Kaide asked Yuya what he was doing and told him to hurry to the cafeteria. She jokingly said she didn't want to have to say there were no seats for him, because if she did, he'd have to sit on her lap. As Yuya was about to leave, Nikaido called him back, saying she had a question. Nikaido noticed that Yuya's blue bag and Kaide's pink lunchbox were a perfect match. Yuya said nothing, prompting Nikaido to ask if she could take his silence as confirmation. Then, Nikaido picked up his lunch bag and left. Yuya asked her where she was going, and Nikaido replied that she would be joining him and Kaide, assuring Yuya that he wouldn't refuse. Yuya could only agree, witnessing all of this. Kaide looked at Yuya with a displeased expression, accusing him of being a deceiver. At the cafeteria, Utsuki was surprised by the appearance of Yuya's lunchbox, with its appetizing steak. She asked if Kaide made it, remarking that it looked like something from a restaurant. Kaide smiled and asked Utsuki if she wanted to try some, making it impossible for her to refuse the opportunity. At this point, Nikaido also spoke up, saying that she wanted to try the steak too. She asked Yuya to let her sample it. Yuya became tense, thinking that he couldn't read Nikaido's mind at all, especially compared to Kaide. He felt there was a stark difference between Kaide feeding Utsuki and him letting Nikaido try the same dish. Yuya wondered what Nikaido thought about this, but he didn't reply. Nikaido asked him what he was worried about, since she hadn't asked him to feed her or anything. Then she took his hand and asked him to give her the chopsticks. Yuya thought that giving her the chopsticks so she could eat might lead to an indirect kiss. He didn't want to make a fuss about it, but there was someone else who was even more annoyed than him. Kaide called out Nikaido's name, saying she was preparing her own steak hamburger. She said that since the steaks were the same, Nikaido could take hers instead of Yuya's. She reminded Nikaido not to take Yuya's food when he was hungry. Afterward, Kaide personally fed Nikaido a piece of hamburger steak. Nikaido praised the food and told Utsuki that the steak was amazing. Kaide called out Yuya's name, looked at him and asked, "Since you two are so close, what kind of relationship do you have with Nikaido?" She looked at them with a jealous gaze. Nikaido replied that they were just classmates, sitting at the same desk, nothing special. The atmosphere between the three of them began to become tense. Yuya then asserted that he and Nikaido were just classmates and told Kaide not to worry. Nikaido tapped on the lunchbox, saying that she wanted to ask about this rather than other things. She pointed out that the two lunchboxes were identical, with the same contents, and asked what that meant. Both Nikaido and Utsuki waited for Yuya and Kaide's reaction. Nikaido was worried, while Utsuki was full of anticipation. Yuya seemed very tense and didn't know what to say. But then Kaide smugly spoke up, saying that those were lunchboxes Yuya made with love. Yuya was shocked, and Nikaido seemed a little confused. Yuya tried to appease Nikaido, saying that even though Kaide said so, he had actually just stuffed it with leftovers from yesterday. Nothing special at all. Nikaido interrupted him, saying that Kaide was the one who made the hamburger steaks, and Yuya only packed them that morning. She was curious to know what that meant. While Yuya was panicking inwardly, Kaide revealed that it was quite obvious, since Yuya and she were living together. Both Nikaido and Utsuki were shocked by this revelation. Nikaido asked Yuya if he intended to explain what was happening, and Yuya reluctantly confirmed. After school, Yuya, Shinji, and their teammates in the soccer team had a practice session, and for some reason, the soccer club's practice became incredibly lively. Yuya's teammates, even his seniors, were all excited. Shinji realized the reason why everyone was so enthusiastic. Kaede was standing on the classroom balcony watching the practice session. Yuya asked her why she was watching, but Kaede just waved and cheered him on. The other teammates were looking at Yuya with disapproval. Yuya thought that if Kaede cheered him on, she would boost their morale, making them work harder, and he would also be under more pressure. Shinji tells Yuya that it's a pain to have the most beautiful girlfriend in Japan. Yuya snaps at him to shut up, saying she's not his girlfriend. Shinji laughs, saying that even though Yuya claims it's only temporary, they're already living under the same roof, and strangely enough, Yuya still denies dating her. Shinji tells Yuya that he's strangely stubborn and advises him to be honest about his feelings, especially after what Kaede revealed this morning. Yuya reluctantly explained his situation, but the story he told was actually a fabricated one. It was a story Sakurako had written for situations like this. The story begins with Yuya discovering that his parents are heavily in debt without his knowledge. Upon returning home, Yuya finds the house empty. In his panic, a menacing man named Taka from a consumer finance company arrives to collect the debt. Just when Yuya thought he was in danger, Sakurako, a lawyer, an old friend of his father and Kaede's mother, appeared and saved him. However, Yuya had to give up his house to pay off his debts. Yuya explains that his parents have disappeared, he's lost his home, and doesn't know what to do. Sakurako tells him he can stay with her until his parents return, and she also mentions that even his father cried and begged her for help. Kaede doesn't react well to Yuya's explanation. She asks why her mother would be so trusting when she was the one who had begged. She cries out that the story isn't true and demands a rewritten version, but her request is denied. Sakurako said that if they wanted to lie, they should mix in some truth to make the story more believable. And indeed, she was right. However, Kaede didn't seem happy. Nikaido was still confused, so she asked if the two of them actually lived under the same roof but weren't dating. Yuya immediately denied it, and Nikaido fell silent afterward. She even remained quiet for the rest of the afternoon, only responding vaguely whenever Yuya spoke to her. Back at soccer practice, Yuya asks Shinji why he's there and what happened to the defense. Shinji tells Yuya not to worry because the senpai are so determined to impress Kaede that they can defend without him. Yuya says that if they have that kind of motivation regularly, their team could win the Tokyo tournament. Shinji suggested that if Yuya dated Kaede and convinced her to manage the baseball team, they could even win the national championship. However, Yuya rejected the idea, saying he would never be able to relax. Yuya asked Shinji to drop the topic and stop talking about idols, telling him to focus on scoring instead. Shinji agreed, telling Yuya to show off his coolness and then asked Yuya to lead the team. They shook hands and continued practicing. Yuya added that he wasn't trying to impress Kaede by doing well, since she had been cheering him on so enthusiastically for quite some time. Shinji only called Yuya cute friend when he showed his enthusiasm. Yuya was about to say something, but then Kaede's loud voice rang out, cheering him on. Yuya wondered why she was only cheering him on today. He thought she would be quiet and just watch to avoid suspicion, but despite that thought, Yuya had to admit that he didn't feel bad about being cheered on. As Yuya and his teammates continued practicing soccer, Kaede continued to cheer him on. Shinji teased Yuya, saying he was really well liked, but Yuya just told him to shut up. Meanwhile, Kaede was doing plank exercises at home, panting and drenched in sweat. Yuya had just finished showering and witnessed this, looking at her in surprise. The instructor in the video Kaede was watching signaled the end of today's training session. Kaede sat down, breathless, and said that she had completed her target for the day. Yuya handed her a glass of water and complimented her on doing a good job. Kaede thanked him and said that the water after a workout really did feel different. It was then that she noticed Yuya was there and asked him how long he had been standing there. Yuya told her not to be surprised and said she was amazing because he had also done planks in the club and knew how difficult it was. Kaede smiled happily in response, saying it was her daily routine. She believed that persistent effort was the key to her being voted the most beautiful high school girl in Japan. And her goddess-like figure wasn't built in a day. Yuya guessed that Kaede was definitely doing more than just planks, and his curiosity was piqued. Kaede said that the other things she was doing were a secret. Yuya said it was okay if she told him. It wasn't a big deal. But Kaede just walked away, saying that it was secrets that made a girl beautiful, so she couldn't share them with him. Then Kaede unexpectedly asked Yuya if he wanted to shower with her and wash her back. But Yuya didn't pay attention and just told her to hurry up and leave. In response, Kaede said that she was very cruel at school during lunchtime. Nikaido gave Yuya her homemade lunchbox, although she said she just stuffed it with leftovers. Nikaido's fans giggled in the background and invited Yuya to join them, because Nikaido had prepared a bento box for him, and he had also received homemade rice from Kaede. Yuya simply decided to ignore them all, but Nikaido smiled and waved to the fans, which only further excited them. To Yuya's annoyance, Nikaido said it was all right, as it was just a kind of service she provided them. Yuya asked Nikaido why she did it, since she didn't usually make bento boxes. Nikaido just laughed and said she did it to tease Yuya. At the same time, Kaede burst in, carrying a lunchbox that matched Yuya's. She happily announced to Yuya that it was time for them to have lunch together. But when Kaede saw the lunchbox Nikaido had made, she asked him what it was. Nikaido replied that it was exactly what she had in mind, and she arrived one step too late. Kaede expressed her annoyance, saying that she had been careless and that she thought they should have gone to school together this morning. However, Yuya recalled that Kaede had gone to bed later than usual this morning. He noticed her sneaking out of the bedroom after he went to sleep and doing something in the kitchen. He didn't know what. Yuya recalled that the day before, Kaede had said she would prepare lunch for him the following day, and she was very excited. He felt a little guilty that she had almost been late because of it, and he didn't want her to have to go to such lengths. Immediately afterwards, Kaede placed her homemade lunchbox in front of Yuya, asking if he was sure he would eat what she had made. Meanwhile, Nikaido said that she had given her homemade lunchbox to Yuya first, so she thought it was only right that Yuya should eat hers first. Someone giggled, saying they had heard everything. That's Utsuki. Yuya thought the #1 troublemaker he didn't want to see again had finally shown up. Utsuki told Kaede and Nikaido that instead of letting Yuya choose between the two dishes, she suggested he judge which one tasted better. Both Kaede and Nikaido agreed with this fair solution. Nikaido said that she didn't care about winning or losing, but if Yuya ate the food she made, she would be happy, and if not, there was no need to ask his opinion. Meanwhile, Shinji stood outside, happily observing. He said he liked Yuya's attitude when he had to choose a dish. The battle began and Kaede volunteered to go first. She offered her homemade lunchbox. Utsuki noted that legendary dishes like karaage and tamagoyaki are truly beloved side dishes that everyone wants to have in their bento box. Utsuki told Kaede that she was aiming for victory. Yuya ate Kaede's food and she asked him if it was delicious. Yuya replied that it was delicious with a distinctly Japanese flavor and aroma. He asked if she had made anything special. Kaede was delighted to see Yuya realize it, explaining that she had added dried tuna slices to the meat before frying it. Yuya wondered where she learned this recipe, but Kaede just laughed and said it was a secret. Yuya finished Kaede's dish, and now it was Nikaido's turn. Coincidentally, Nikaido makes side dishes that are exactly the same as Kaede's. Yuya ate the dish and said it was delicious, but he had never tried it before. Nikaido explained that she had used miso as a seasoning, and she was relieved to know it suited Yuya's taste. Yuya said the dish had a light, elegant flavor and a fragrant sesame aroma that lingered with every bite. Nikaido added that it was because she had added sesame oil when frying. Yuya thought it was hard to tell which dish was better, and it seemed Nikaido was taking his attempt to annoy him too seriously. Then, Yuya mentioned that the eggs were slightly burnt, even though he had tried them and was shocked, and he accidentally dropped his chopsticks. Nikaido asked if the dish wasn't good. She made them with spices that Yuya had mentioned he liked, but Yuya replied that they were actually very delicious. Yuya thought Nikaido remembered what he had said a long time ago. Utsuki said that lunchtime was almost over and asked Yuya if he had decided which one tasted better. Yuya replied that Nikaido was the winner of the lunch cooking competition. Kaede was genuinely shocked to hear that. When Kaede and Yuya returned home, she sulked and asked him why Nikaido had won, and whether Nikaido's chicken was really that delicious. Seeing Kaede like that, Yuya realized she wasn't happy. It seemed she didn't entirely agree with the result. Yuya actually preferred her fried chicken, and was about to declare Kaede the winner, but he explained that the reason he chose Nikaido was because of her fried eggs. Yuya said that Kaede's fried eggs were also delicious. They looked appealing and had a savory flavor, just like a dish from a traditional Japanese restaurant. Kaede asked him what Nikaido's fried eggs tasted like. Yuya said they were sweet. So sweet it was as if Nikaido had added too much sugar, and they tasted like the eggs his mother used to make. Yuya also said that this might be because Nikaido knows what he likes, since they once talked about whether fried eggs should be sweet or not. That's why he chose Nikaido's dish, but he also said that if it weren't for that, he would have chosen Kaede's dish. Kaede understood his reason. However, there's another reason she's sulking, and it's a more serious issue than the lunch. She asked Yuya why he called her Hitotsuba-san, but only called Nikaido-san Nikaido without adding a suffix. She felt like there was a wall between them because Yuya called Nikaido without a suffix while calling her Hitotsuba-san. Kaede wanted to be called by her name without the suffix, and she asked him why he called Nikaido that way. Although Yuya thought there was no particular reason, he explained that he and Nikaido happened to sit next to each other, and their conversations became intimate because they both played sports and easily got along. Nikaido had a very strong personality, like a prince, so before he realized it, he had started calling her affectionately Nikaido. That's why Yuya naturally started calling her that. Later, Kaede said that she also wanted to be closer to Yuya emotionally. She admitted that, although no one thought so, she had to make a great effort to call him Yuya. Therefore, she wanted him to call her by her name as well. Time passed, but Yuya still hadn't replied. Finally, he reluctantly accepted it and called her Kaede. But the feeling of embarrassment came over him more intensely than he expected. His face turned red like a tomato. So hot, it felt like it was about to burst into flames. However, Yuya noticed that Kaede's face was just as flushed as his. Kaede was overjoyed and thanked him. She felt like she was on top of the world when she finally got Yuya to call her by her name. It was truly a day to celebrate. Then she suddenly remembered that she needed to do her daily exercise and skincare routine while Yuya took a shower. At that moment, Yuya came out of the bathroom, thanked her for waiting, and told her she could go take a shower. He noticed she was using some kind of device and curiously asked what it was. Kaede just stared at him, unable to hide her admiration for Yuya's hair, skin, and scent, to the point that she was almost drooling as she gazed at him. He anxiously asked if she was all right, as she looked dreamy. Then he gently touched her forehead to check if she had a fever, but no, she didn't. Kaede's face turned even redder. She felt it was unfair that he had surprised her like this. She was captivated by his radiant smile. Kaede laughed, telling him not to worry. She explained that the device she was using was a beauty tool called a steam machine. Yuya nodded, seemingly very pleased to hear this. He said that he now felt much happier knowing that her beauty was the result of her daily efforts, and that made him truly happy because he was the only one who knew. Meanwhile, Kaede was overjoyed that all her daily efforts were recognized by Yuya. The feeling that Yuya thought she was beautiful made her happier than ever. Then, Kaede said she had a request, which flustered Yuya, who turned his face away. Kaede quickly grabbed his cheek, looked him straight in the eyes, and asked if he had forgotten his promise to call her by her name. Yuya replied that he would try to do so. The next morning, he was surprised to find Kaede already up early and having breakfast. Yuya noticed dark circles under her eyes, which worried him, but he also thought it was unlikely she'd stayed up late since she was usually an early riser. Kaede, with some difficulty, explained that Yuya had finally started calling her by her name, so she was determined to go to school with him no matter what. Yuya felt this was too embarrassing and could lead to misunderstandings. However, he made the mistake of not calling her by her name, causing Kaede to glare at him, then shake his body, saying it was okay and she just wanted to go to school with him. She reiterated her request that he call her by her name. Yuya kept apologizing, but Kaede kept shaking him. She insisted that she wouldn't stop until he agreed to go to school with her. Finally, Yuya reluctantly agreed and said he would go with her. He also added that he couldn't breathe anymore. Kaede finally let go of his hand, happily saying that it would be her first time going to school with Yuya. And if that's the case, she has to get ready quickly. Kaede said that today she has to put in more effort than usual. But then, she did something that astonished Yuya to the core. She asked him which bra she thought was cuter, while standing in front of him completely naked. Yuya immediately covered his eyes, shyly asking her why she was asking him that. She said that since it was her first day of school with him, she naturally had to wear something lucky. Yuya didn't think so, but Kaede insisted on asking him which one was cuter. Yuya hesitated before choosing the red bra, thinking that the passionate red would suit her enthusiasm today. However, he didn't forget to mention that the blue one was also cute. Kaede understood and decided to wear the red bra today and choose the navy blue bra for tomorrow. After saying that, she left to change. Yuya felt utterly exhausted. He thought the day had only just begun, but he already felt drained. He wondered if he would be all right if he continued like this. When he arrived at school, he was like a nervous mess, and many students stared at Yuya. He thought all his fears had come true. Shinji greeted Yuya and asked how he felt about becoming the star of the day. Yuya used only one word to explain: hell. Shinji laughed, saying it was only natural since Yuya and Kaede went to school together, like a couple. Shinji advised Yuya to prepare himself for this. Yuya asked Shinji to stop and explained that even though he told her not to, Kaede still wouldn't listen to him. Shinji seemed a little confused. Then Nikaido arrived and said she heard Yuya had started dating Kaede, and asked if that was true. Yuya wondered why this had become a rumor, but Nikaido grabbed his shoulder and whispered that she heard Kaede had confessed her feelings to Yuya, but he hadn't responded. Since they went to school together, Nikaido asked him if that meant they were dating. Meanwhile, Nikaido's fans felt envious of the interaction between Yuya and Kaede. Nikaido went on to say that there were rumors that Yuya called Kaede by her name in a loving tone. She also told Yuya that he would feel better if he confessed his feelings. Yuya admitted that he still hadn't reciprocated Kaede's confession. Just then, the bell rang, signaling the end of class and the start of lunchtime. Nikaido said she would ask for more details later. Yuya never imagined that there would be a day when he would look forward to the end of his morning classes. Yuya and Nikaido had a private conversation. Nikaido asked him to continue the conversation they had left off. Yuya explained that, as he had said this morning, he wasn't dating Kaede and hadn't yet responded to her confession. He came to school with Kaede today because she had forced him. Nikaido asked why he didn't answer, since they were very close and called each other by their first names. She also asked Yuya if he had feelings for anyone else. Yuya said he was afraid, and Nikaido asked why he was afraid. All he needed to do was reciprocate Kaede's feelings. Yuya explained that he was afraid of losing the people he loved, like one day, those he thought would always be by his side, suddenly disappearing. He feared it would happen again, and although he wanted to reciprocate Kaede's feelings, he couldn't move on. Nikaido understood and said that it was truly heartbreaking when a loved one suddenly disappeared, and just thinking about it made her heart ache. However, she also apologized to Yuya for not being able to truly understand the pain and loneliness he had gone through, because she was not him and was not directly involved in his situation. Nikaido asked Yuya if he was being foolish, because he needed to understand that Kaede wasn't that kind of person, and that she lived under the same roof as him because she wanted to be with him. She asked if he really thought a girl like that would just disappear from his sight. Deep down, Yuya agreed with what Nikaido said. He also thought Kaede was different, and he was the one who understood that best. Yuya told Nikaido that she was right, and Nikaido laughed, saying that as long as Yuya understood, that was enough. She was surprised that Yuya had spoken more weakly than she had expected. Then, Nikaido patted Yuya hard on the back, making him slightly dizzy. At that moment, Yuya received a call from Shinji, but when he answered, it was Utsuki. She said it was an emergency and asked him to go to the medical room immediately. Yuya was stunned, and Utsuki announced that Kaede had collapsed right after gym class ended. Yuya panicked upon hearing the news, and the call ended. Nikaido said their conversation was over and told Yuya to hurry to Kaede, as she was sure to be waiting for him. Yuya apologized and thanked her before rushing to the infirmary. When Yuya arrived, he was breathless, but there was no nurse there. He found Kaede and asked if she was all right. Then he touched her forehead, feeling that she had a fever. Kaede giggled and said that his hand was cool and pleasant. Yuya thought that with such a high fever, she would have difficulty speaking. However, Kaede reassured him that she only had a mild fever and would be fine. Yuya asked her how high her fever was, and Kaede informed him that her temperature was 38.7 degrees. Yuya said he couldn't assume it was okay, as it might just be the seasonal flu, and suggested she go home early and see a doctor. Kaede sat up in bed and told him not to worry. She said it wasn't the flu or anything, just overwork and lack of sleep. She reassured Yuya that she would be all right. Yuya grabbed her and said that she was not all right at all. Kaede held Yuya's arm and told him to calm down. She told him not to go anywhere and to stay with her. She wanted him to only look at her. Yuya said he would try. He told her not to worry, that everything would be all right and that he wasn't going anywhere. Kaede hugged her brother and asked him again if he would never leave her. Yuya replied that he wouldn't leave and said that she should rely on him more, that she could lean on him if needed. Kaede definitely asked again to make sure she heard correctly, then said that although she didn't seem like it, she always needed attention. Yuya didn't mind at all and told her to lean on him a lot. He stroked her head and hugged her tightly. Suddenly the door opened and the nurse walked in. She thanked Kaede for waiting and said she had brought a cold compress to put on Kaede's forehead. Chika-sensei, the new nurse, was still unaware of the scene before her. Yuya was quite surprised, but Kaede didn't seem bothered at all, still clinging tightly to him. Chika-sensei, with her striking long hair, recognized Yuya immediately and asked him what he was doing there. Chika-sensei is a head nurse, a mature woman with a charming appearance, but Yuya finds her adorable, almost mascot-like. He's heard she's very popular, both male and female. Yuya was initially a little flustered, But then he explained that he was a little worried about Kaide and wanted to visit her for a bit. Kaide greeted Chika-sensei, then told the nurse that Yuya was her boyfriend, but didn't finish the sentence. Chika-sensei said that she remembered Yuya as the person Kaide had told her about, and then told Yuya that he would surely be worried when he heard that his precious girlfriend had fainted. Chika-sensei revealed that Kaide kept calling Yuya's name in her sleep, which left Yuya quite confused. She also joked that he must be very much in love with Kaide to rush over as soon as he received the news from his friends. Chika-sensei even seemed envious, saying she wished she had such a devoted boyfriend. Yuya quickly changed the subject, asking Chika-sensei about Kaide's situation. He wanted to know if she had a cold or needed to go to the hospital. Chika-sensei quickly regained her professional demeanor, explaining that Kaide only had a fever from overwork and would be better if she rested in bed all day. Yuya breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing that, but Chika-sensei reminded him that the bell had just rung, and he should return to class immediately. However, Yuya realized that leaving wouldn't be easy, as Kaide was clinging to him like a cocoon. Kaide insisted he not leave, begging him to stay and rest with her in the infirmary. Chika-sensei joked that if he wanted, he could stay and enjoy his time with Kaide, but then she became serious and warned that the infirmary was not a place for cuddling. She sternly told Kaide to lie down and rest and asked Yuya to quickly return to class. Yuya hurried out of the infirmary, saying goodbye to Kaide and wishing her a good rest. Kaide called out Yuya's name with a lingering look in her eyes, not wanting him to leave. But Yuya told himself that he had to become a strong enough man to protect Kaide, and so he needed to try even harder. After school, Yuya attended the soccer club's practice. Despite worrying about Kaide's condition, he couldn't miss the training session. Yuya decided that after practice, he would quickly return home to take care of her. As Yuya was about to leave the locker room, Kaide unexpectedly grabbed his arm. Kaide asked if he planned to practice more. Surprised, Yuya asked why she was there and if she was okay. Kaide reassured him that she was fine. Although she had missed all her afternoon classes, it had made her feel much better. However, Yuya sternly reminded her that it didn't change the fact that she was still recovering and that she should have rested at home instead of waiting for him here. Kaide said she did it because she wanted to go home with Yuya, no matter what. She asked if there was anything wrong with that. Yuya replied that it wasn't the case, but he reminded her that she could wait in the classroom and just text him, and he would come to pick her up. Yuya took Kaide's hand and noticed it was cold. He explained that it was punishment for her stubbornly waiting for him outside in the cold. Afterward, the two walked home together. Yuya took off his gloves and gave them to Kaide, saying they should hurry home and eat something warm. He also suggested they stop by the supermarket to buy vegetables and meat, then cook a hot pot together. The next day, they could use the leftover hot pot to make porridge. Kaide interrupted Yuya, saying she was glad he lent her his gloves, but worried his hands would get cold. Yuya reassured her that he would keep his hands in his pockets. However, Kaide suddenly had an idea. She put on a glove on her right hand and slipped her left hand into her jacket pocket. Yuya also put on another glove. Then, Kaide took Yuya's hand and placed both their hands into the same jacket pocket. Kaide said that if they did that, Yuya's hands wouldn't get cold, and she thought it was a good idea because even though they were holding hands, no one outside could see. Yuya thought that even though no one could see it clearly from the outside, holding hands like this was very obvious, even much more intimate. He thought to himself, this made him feel awkward. Kaide continued to say that Yuya was the one who had held her hand for a long time before, so his embarrassment now was unconvincing. Yuya admitted it, but he still felt a little embarrassed. Kaide asked him if he hated holding her hand on the way home. Yuya quickly replied that it wasn't the case. He thought that holding hands like this, with fingers intertwined, was something only lovers would do. And if the person beside him was Kaide, anyone would be so happy they'd shed tears. Then Kaide urged Yuya to speed up, reminding him that the supermarket would close if they didn't hurry, especially in this cold weather. Yuya and Kaide continued walking, feeling the warmth of each other's hands. February arrives, bringing with it a sense of surprise. For most high school students, only one thing occupies their minds: Valentine's Day. It's said to be a conspiracy by the confectioners, a day for the lonely who haven't received a drop of blood. Whatever the case, it remains one of the biggest events of the year. Kaide and Yuya sat opposite each other, and Yuya asked her what was wrong. Kaide irritably said that she knew Yuya had many admirers, evidenced by several female students staring at her. Yuya just laughed and said it was definitely just her imagination because he wasn't the particularly striking type. Kaide countered, saying that it was precisely things like that that prevented him from realizing his own charm. She praised Yuya, saying he was wonderful for his dedication, hard work, and the simple kindness he sometimes displayed. She emphasized that his appeal stemmed not only from his appearance, but also from his amazing personality, and told him he should understand that many girls are attracted to him. When Kaede noticed Nikaido's intense gaze on Yuya, Yuya turned to ask Nikaido what was wrong. Nikaido simply smiled, saying that being a popular guy wasn't easy. Kaede seemed to sense something from Nikaido's words, making the atmosphere slightly tense. Then, Utsuki asked Kaede and Nikaido if they had decided what to do for Valentine's Day next week. Kaede eagerly replied that she would make a chocolate cake this weekend as requested by Yuya. Utsuki complimented her, saying she was amazing. Kaede said that Yuya had told her he wanted to eat a cake like that, so she just wanted to fulfill his wish. But it was also her first time making one, so she was worried about whether she could do it. Yuya praised Utsuki for easing the tension. Afterwards, Utsuki asked Nikaido if she had made anything, but Nikaido replied that she hadn't thought about it yet. Yuya looked at Nikaido, who was gulping down her glass of water, and reminded her that she had drunk it all, leaving only air. Utsuki then suggested they could make chocolate together at Kaede's house over the weekend, and the whole group could make chocolate together and give it to their friends. Hearing this, Yuya began to worry, because doing so might reveal that he was living with Kaede. He glanced at Kaede, silently asking if she understood what he was thinking. Kaede smiled back, seemingly understanding. She happily exclaimed that making chocolate sounded wonderful and that they should do it together. Yuya was shocked when, instead of refusing the invitation, Kaede immediately agreed, smiling and giving a thumbs up with a smug expression. Shinji asked if he could come to Kaede's house and if they could have dinner together. Kaede happily replied that of course they would make chocolate while Yuya and Shinji were at their club activities, and she would prepare dinner for Yuya when he returned. Shinji whispered to Yuya that it was fun to eat Kaede's steak hamburger. Yuya said nothing, only thinking that he was bound by fate, as it was inevitable that everyone would find out that he and Kaede lived together. Utsuki asked Nikaido if she wanted to join the girls-only gathering before the boys arrived, and also asked Kaede if she agreed. Kaede was a little reluctant, but agreed nonetheless. Nikaido said she was happy to be invited, but wouldn't be joining because she had work to do over the weekend. As Nikaido turned to leave, Yuya asked if she was going back to her room, and she replied that she was. She mentioned that there would be an English test after lunch, so she wanted to review and prepare. This was news to Yuya as he watched Nikaido's figure disappear. Kaede watched her, seemingly lost in thought. Time flew by, and finally the weekend arrived. At Kaede's house, Yuya was getting ready. He mentioned that he had a soccer club practice that morning. Shinji had left early. Kaede came to bring Yuya his lunchbox. Yuya thanked Kaede for taking the time to prepare it for him, but she just smiled and said she was using leftovers from the day before. Even so, Yuya was very happy and thanked her. Kaede told Yuya that he should go home with Shinji after practice instead of practicing extra hours, at least for that day. She also said that she wanted Yuya to enjoy her lunchbox. Not just the lunch itself, but the love she put into it. As she spoke, Kaede gently tapped Yuya's chest. Then she shyly added that actually she wanted to ask Yuya for a farewell kiss before leaving, but she would patiently wait for that day to come. Yuya knew perfectly well that Kaede was doing this on purpose to make his heart race and embarrass him. But he also realized that Kaede was overdoing it a little as her face was flushed, a sign that she herself was embarrassed to say she wanted a kiss goodbye. Not wanting to be outdone, Yuya decided to reciprocate. He touched Kaede's forehead and said goodbye. Then he unexpectedly kissed her on the forehead before quickly running out the door, saying as he ran that he would see her again. Yuya vanished in an instant, leaving Kaede stunned and speechless. Then she suddenly screamed, as if to declare to the whole world that Yuya had kissed her. After practice, Shinji and Yuya went to Kaede's house together. Upon arriving in front of the building, Shinji looked surprised, calling it Yuya and Kaede's love nest. Yuya quickly denied it, then told Shinji, who was still standing there staring blankly at the building, to hurry up and go inside. He said that Kaede kept texting him, asking when they would arrive. Yuya opened the door and stepped inside, loudly announcing his return. Kaede happily greeted him, calling him by sweet terms and asking if he wanted a bath, dinner, or her. Shinji, standing right behind Yuya, couldn't help but laugh when he heard that. Yuya, without any embarrassment, replied that he would choose Kaede, as she had suggested. He even joked that he would eat her right away. Kaede immediately panicked, even though she was the one who had joked first, trying to stop Yuya because Shinji was standing there. But Yuya just told her to be quiet and moved closer, preparing to kiss her again. Just then, Utsuki peeked out from another room, witnessed the entire scene before him, and was utterly astonished. Kaede, noticing Utsuki's presence, quickly turned and hugged Yuya tightly, trying to cover up the situation. Under Utsuki's questioning gaze and stunned expression, Kaede stammered an explanation that she and Yuya hadn't kissed. Yuya had just tried, but they hadn't done anything. Yuya, still holding her in his arms, just smiled faintly and remarked that Kaede's explanation was not at all convincing. Utsuki turned to Shinji, who had closed his eyes to avoid looking, and asked what had just happened and whether Kaede and Yuya had actually kissed. Shinji said it would be more interesting to discuss this at dinner, and he also wanted to know why Yuya had acted so boldly. As Shinji and Utsuki walked towards the living room, Shinji turned back to look at Yuya and told him to hurry out after talking to Kaede. He also teased that, although he knew Yuya wanted to hug the person he liked forever, he shouldn't go too far. This made Yuya a little uncomfortable. Still clinging to each other, Yuya gently told Kaede to hurry to the living room with Shinji and Utsuki, then asked if dinner was ready. But Kaede remained silent, continuing to hold him and saying she didn't want to go. When Yuya asked why, Kaede reproached him for making her heart race so fast when she was the one who wanted to confuse him. She said he was being unfair and tightened her embrace. Yuya sighed, then let go of her hand, admitting that he had acted on emotion. He asked Kaede what she wanted him to do to make her happy again. However, even though Yuya had let go, Kaede still refused to release him. Kaede said she wanted a kiss and would forgive him if Yuya kissed her. Yuya fell silent, thinking that this would be his first kiss, and he felt it wasn't right to do it now, especially since he hadn't confessed his feelings to Kaede yet. But then Kaede laughed and said she was just joking. She said that next time they could kiss, but for now she just wanted Yuya to hold her tightly, wholeheartedly express his love, and assure her that he wouldn't let her go. Yuya did exactly that, hugging Kaede tightly, holding her close. In his mind, Yuya thought this moment was exactly like that of a couple in love. But at the same time, he felt there was something wrong with hugging her before confessing his feelings. However, they were already living together, so perhaps it wasn't too different. The two hugged for a long time. Finally, Kaede spoke up, saying that was enough. She felt embarrassed. But Yuya still wouldn't let go, saying he just wanted a little longer. They had no idea that Shinji and Utsuki were secretly watching from the living room. Utsuki turned to Shinji and asked what they were performing, to which Shinji replied that it was a masterpiece of love between two people passionately embracing each other. Then Shinji and Utsuki quickly took out their phones and captured the moment between Kaede and Yuya. Their noise attracted Kaede and Yuya's attention, and they discovered that the two were taking pictures. Utsuki showed Kaede the photo and asked if she thought it was beautiful. Kaede happily said it was perfect and asked Utsuki to send it to her later, as she wanted to use it as her wallpaper. Utsuki turned to Yuya and asked if he wanted to keep the photo, but Yuya just told him to delete it immediately, his face flushed with embarrassment. Utsuki asked in surprise why, because Kaede and he looked so happy at the time, but Yuya just repeated to stop. He felt ashamed of being witnessed doing such silly things. Meanwhile, Kaede happily told Utsuki what Yuya had said earlier, making Yuya even more embarrassed and wanting to sink into the ground. Shinji interrupted Yuya's thoughts by inviting him to eat, telling him to enjoy the meat because they rarely had the chance to eat something so luxurious. It turned out that dinner that night consisted of premium Wagyu beef. Yuya told Shinji that he was so glad he was there too. Shinji laughed and said that Yuya was exaggerating, then added that it was no wonder Yuya felt so happy hugging the girl he liked. Yuya realized that too, but there was a truth he couldn't ignore. Something deep in his heart. Yuya admitted that he was the one who wanted to scream, who didn't want her to leave. Shinji said that from now on what Yuya did was up to him, so Shinji wouldn't say anything more. However, Shinji sensed that Kaede was okay, and he knew what Yuya was thinking. Eventually, they became friends, and Shinji also advised Yuya to be brave and give it a try. Afterward, they continued eating dinner. Yuya told Kaede to add more meat and vegetables, and then told Utsuki that she should only share the photo with Kaede while he was eating. Yuya thought he was eating delicious food to regain energy and prepare for battle, a battle to become more honest with himself. Watching Yuya eat, Kaede smiled softly and said that he could eat a lot. But she had prepared an early Valentine's Day surprise, so she advised him to eat in moderation. She winked at Yuya and said that she had made this dish with a lot of love for him, telling him to look forward to it. After dinner, Yuya and Shinji washed the dishes together. Yuya praised the sukiyaki, saying it was delicious and complimented Kaede on her cooking skills. He seriously considered that she could serve it in a restaurant, but perhaps she'd need a proper pot. Shinji felt confused. Then Yuya explained that the first time Kaede cooked for him was beef stew, and she served it in a pot. He said that she suddenly banged loudly on the pot and said it was a good idea because it would reduce the amount of dishwashing work. Shinji laughed heartily, praising Kaede for doing such a great job and saying it was a truly unique idea. Yuya went on to say that Kaede looked embarrassed, so he gradually felt like he was the one in the wrong and that it was awkward. Meanwhile, Kaede and Utsuki were listening to their conversation. Kaede reminded Yuya not to reveal embarrassing things without her permission, and told Utsuki not to laugh so much. Utsuki asked Yuya if he had any photos from that time when Kaide treated him to his first meal. Surprisingly, Yuya said that he took full photos and then showed them to everyone. The photos were all beautiful, but the food in the pot Kaide was holding was blurry. Shinji said he understood. All the photos focused on Kaide, and the food was completely unimportant. Shinji told Yuya to stop showing off, and Kaide felt incredibly embarrassed. She started to cry, but it wasn't real crying, just for the sake of Utsuki. Utsuki comforted her, saying it was okay, that it was difficult to have a boyfriend who constantly showed off like that. Yuya immediately denied it, saying he wasn't showing off. He just wanted Shinji and Utsuki to know how cute Kaide was at home. However, Shinji commented that such unconscious boasting was unbearable. Kaide then announced that it was time to move on to the main part of the day. She said it was Yuya's turn to make her heart flutter, and asked him to accept her Valentine's chocolates filled with love. Yuya felt his heart pounding so hard it felt like it was about to jump out of his chest. He wondered why, since this wasn't the first time a girl had given him Valentine's Day chocolate. He glanced at Shinji and asked why he wasn't nervous. Shinji replied that he wasn't nervous at all. On the contrary, he was very excited and curious to know what kind of chocolate his girlfriend would give him, and he couldn't wait any longer. Yuya thought to himself that this was the calmness of a man nicknamed the school's lovebird. Then, Utsuki excitedly asked who wanted to receive a special Valentine's Day chocolate, handmade by a beautiful girl. She was very excited, but Shinji was equally enthusiastic, exclaiming that he also wanted to try homemade chocolate. Yuya remained silent, his gaze resting on Kaide, who was pouting. Yuya realized she was angry. Utsuki asked Yuya if he wanted to eat Kaide's Valentine's Day chocolate. It turned out Kaide was sulking because she thought Yuya wouldn't eat it. But then, Yuya suddenly shouted that he wanted to eat, surprising everyone. The girls then gave the boys their homemade chocolates. Shinji opened Utsuki's chocolate package and was surprised. She said it was the Jato, a type of chocolate that Shinji liked. It was made slightly bitter so he could eat it, even though he doesn't like sweets. Shinji replied that he would enjoy the dish slowly later, as he didn't want to eat hastily, and also said he couldn't be affectionate in front of Yuya and Kaide. Yuya asked Shinji and Utsuki what they were doing in his house, and whether they were going to support each other. He reminded Shinji to calm down and looked at Kaide, who was waiting for him, her face a little worried. Kaide gave Yuya homemade chocolate, her hands trembling, saying that she had tried very hard to make it and hoped he would try it. She gave him a chocolate cake with 3 layers of fluffy sponge, mousse, and cream, with orange cream between the layers and topped with a layer of caramel. Yuya thanked Kaide and tried the cake. She nervously asked if it suited his taste. In Yuya's mind, he thought the cake was so delicious it was in no way inferior to what you'd find in high-end Western pastry shops. He told Kaide that the cake was truly amazing, that he had never eaten such a delicious chocolate cake before. Kaide happily thanked him again. Utsuki teased Yuya, saying he was terrible at judging food and asking him to be more articulate. Yuya didn't know how to express himself properly. Of course, it was delicious, and he was really happy that she had made him such a wonderful cake. Making handmade sweets wasn't easy, and he never thought she would make something so delicious for him, especially from start to finish. However, Yuya felt a little regretful. He blamed himself for not having the courage to take another step. He continued to thank Kaide, saying that the cake made him very happy and that he could clearly feel her affection. Finally, Yuya confessed that he hoped their relationship would last forever. Kaide was touched by Yuya's words and also wished for the same. She baked the cake to celebrate Valentine's Day, but actually she wanted to eat it too. Kaide was about to ask if she could have a piece of cake, but then realized it was already 10 p.m. Hearing this, Yuya calmly replied, thinking Kaide didn't need to ask his permission. Then, Yuya checked the cake box and noticed there were many cakes inside. He thought it would be best if they ate together so they wouldn't gain weight. This made Kaide quite angry, and her anger made Yuya even more worried. He felt as though he could almost hear her grinding her teeth in anger. Even so, Yuya didn't show his anxiety clearly. He was lost in fanciful thoughts about Kaide, even imagining the underwear she was wearing. Yuya realized he had lost his focus, so he told Kaide to be quiet and hurriedly walked away from her. Kaide was very confused by Yuya's strange behavior. He hurried away for a moment, then returned with a plate and a piece of cake for Kaide, without saying another word. Yuya immediately put a piece of cake that Kaide had made into her mouth. This surprised Kaide, but also delighted her immensely. She blushed, her heart pounding. Then she quickly took a piece of cake and fed it to Yuya using the same fork. Yuya was surprised by the taste of the cake the moment it entered his mouth. It felt sweeter than before. His face immediately flushed red with embarrassment. Kaide noticed Yuya's surprised reaction and immediately understood that he had noticed a difference in the taste of the cake. She explained that they had unintentionally exchanged a kiss through the fork, but it wouldn't be fair if Yuya only felt happy because he should be blushing like her. Kaide felt it was unfair because she was the only one who could easily feel her heart racing, while Yuya couldn't. Yuya quickly replied that it wasn't a matter of emotional fairness. In truth, he felt incredibly happy to be living with the woman he admired. But then Yuya realized that what he had just said shouldn't have been said. Deep down, he felt foolish for blurting out something so important. Kaide was surprised by the truth Yuya had just revealed, and the atmosphere suddenly fell silent. Kaide happily hugged Yuya tightly from behind, but Yuya felt embarrassed and tried to pull away because he wasn't ready to admit his feelings yet. Before Yuya left, Kaide whispered to him that she wanted him to leave her alone. Hearing this, Yuya felt reluctant to leave Kaide alone, so he decided to stay a little longer. Kaide was overjoyed. Before they both went to sleep, Kaide asked Yuya if she could sleep closer to him. She happily said that today was a very happy day because Yuya had complimented the cake she made. Both of them felt happy because even on that day, they had shared an indirect kiss. Yuya felt very happy to hear that. Kaide hugged Yuya tightly, causing Yuya to lose control of his emotions. And finally, he turned back to face Kaide and hugged her tightly. The following day on Valentine's Day at school, Yuya and Nikaido talked about chocolate. Nikaido then gave Yuya a box of chocolates, explaining that she was worried Yuya might be disappointed with the taste of Hitosuba's homemade chocolates. However, Nikaido also admitted that it might have been a futile effort. Yet she still said that Yuya appreciated her gift. Then Nikaido realized it was time for Kaide and Utsuki to come to Yuya's class. Therefore, before class began, she immediately warned Yuya to keep the chocolate safe so that Kaide wouldn't find it. Then Nikaido left the classroom. As soon as she left, Shinji went to greet Yuya. Shinji noticed that Nikaido seemed strange and suspected that Yuya had done something to her, but Yuya didn't admit anything, thinking that Nikaido had only given him chocolate from outside. The students in the class are discussing the upcoming field trip, which will include activities such as skiing and stargazing. Shinji then mentioned how much he was looking forward to the field trip next week, but actually, the students discussing the field trip were Utsuki and Kaide. Kaide said she was really looking forward to stargazing with Yuya. With a happy smile, Yuya replied that he was also eager to spend time with Kaide. As they talked like that, all the girls in the class looked at them with envious eyes for some reason. But Yuya and Nikaido didn't notice. However, in the middle of their conversation, Yuya suddenly remembered that he still had the chocolate from Nikaido, and he felt guilty, worried that this might become a problem between him and Kaide. Suddenly, Nikaido came to see Yuya again, this time bringing even more chocolate for him. Kaide saw this and felt confused, as did Yuya. Nikaido quickly explained that it was chocolate from her fans. Yuya couldn't imagine how many fans Nikaido had, but they all knew that Nikaido had a princely aura. Even though she was a girl, Yuya really wished he could have a princely aura like hers. Nikaido noticed Kaide was there and clarified that Yuya and she were just friends, adding that it wasn't the kind of relationship Kaide thought. Nikaido only wanted to prevent misunderstandings between Kaide and Yuya. However, Nikaido's attitude and behavior angered Kaide greatly. She glared at Nikaido angrily but couldn't express her jealousy and rage at that moment. Unfortunately, the bell signaling the start of class rang, so Kaide and Utsuki had to go to their classroom. Kaide, who still wanted to talk to Yuya, felt annoyed that Nikaido had interrupted their time together. However, Utsuki immediately pulled Kaide's hand to prevent her from staying too long. Yuya felt guilty about Kaide but still tried to act okay to reassure her. After Kaide left Yuya's class, Nikaido looked at Yuya with a cold, unsympathetic gaze. But Yuya clearly realized it was his fault for not clarifying things. When lunchtime arrived, the students began leaving the classroom. Yuya asked Nikaido if she was going to the cafeteria, but Nikaido refused and decided not to go with his friends, instead going out to the courtyard to think alone. She realized that she had liked Yuya for a long time. But Nikaido knew that Yuya liked Kaide because she had a princess aura, while Nikaido wasn't as feminine as Kaide. A few minutes later, Yuya approached Nikaido. He said he couldn't abandon his friend who was in trouble. This made Nikaido feel uneasy. After some time, Nikaido finally mustered the courage to confess his feelings, though it was too late. When Yuya heard that, he bravely admitted that he already had someone in his heart. Clearly, Yuya really liked Kaide. Nikaido was upset, but she didn't want to ruin her friendship with Yuya, so she tried to break the silence with a casual conversation. Later, Nikaido suggested that Yuya should express his feelings to Kaide during the school trip. She bluntly told him to do it during the stargazing session. Yuya thanked Nikaido for her advice and appreciated her feelings for him. On his way home, Yuya saw Kaide walking ahead of him. He wanted to quietly hug her from behind, but Kaide suddenly turned around and greeted Yuya. Yuya was embarrassed that he hadn't hugged Kaide in time and wondered how she knew he was behind her. Kaide replied that it was thanks to her strong intuition. She asked Yuya what he intended to do to surprise her, but Yuya innocently replied that he just wanted to hug her from behind without her knowing. Hearing this, Kaide was surprised but happily said that she would pretend not to know and allowed Yuya to hug her from behind with a pleading expression. Kaede asked Yuya to hug her right there and then. Then, she suddenly remembered Nikaido, who had given Yuya chocolate. But Kaede tried to dismiss her suspicions about Yuya, since Nikaido had made it clear that they were just friends. Kaede was lost in thought, but she quickly snapped back to reality when Yuya asked if she wanted to go home because he was hungry. Yuya immediately took Kaede's hand. But unexpectedly, Kaede asked what the relationship between Yuya and Nikaido really was. Yuya remained silent, as he didn't want to inadvertently reveal his plan to confess his feelings to Kaede during the school trip. When he got home, Yuya immediately warmed up Nikaido's chocolate. He told himself that it was impossible for Nikaido to make such perfect chocolate just because they sat next to each other in class. This time, Yuya finally understood why Nikaido had given him chocolate. This morning, the day of the field trip finally arrived. Yuya and Kaede walked together. Kaede didn't want to let go of Yuya's hand. She felt sad that they would have to part ways on this rare bus ride. Kaede also didn't like being separated from Yuya for over 3 hours. But Yuya tried to calm her down. He explained that 3 hours was nothing compared to the distance between them at school, as they often took different classes and joined different clubs. However, Kaede still felt sad, because she had thought of many things she could do with Yuya on the bus. Kaede could enjoy the scenery and rest her head on Yuya's shoulder. Yuya said that if he could, he would like to be with Kaede on a bus ride. Hearing this, Kaede felt very embarrassed. But suddenly, Yuya remembered a few days ago, when he truly knew he had a good night's sleep, when he and Kaede slept in each other's arms. That night, Yuya really wanted to be with Kaede, but he couldn't. Before boarding the bus, Kaede reminded Yuya to be careful with his words so that his friends wouldn't misunderstand. Kaede also shared her plan with Utsuki. They decided to show off the good qualities of their boyfriends. Kaede wanted to let Utsuki know that her boyfriend was a caring and kind person, even if he was sometimes a little clumsy and not always straightforward. Hearing this, Yuya blushed slightly and quietly said that compliments always come so easily. A little while later, when they arrived at school, they had to go their separate ways. Yuya told himself that he wasn't a child who had to go alone. In fact, he would miss Kaede very much. But suddenly, Nikaido appeared and overheard what Yuya had just said. She teased him, telling him not to cry just because he had to be away from Kaede for a while. However, before Yuya could respond to Nikaido's words, she had to quickly leave because fans were inviting her to speak. Yuya boarded the bus and Shinji quickly went to sit next to him. Shinji started the conversation with a slightly mocking expression, suggesting they could talk about what they liked about each other's girlfriends during the trip. Shinji also suggested another topic if Yuya wanted to hear him talk about his girlfriend. Yuya simply declined every topic Shinji chose, because that way he could react indifferently, for example, saying something like, "That's cute," or something similar, since Yuya understood that listening to Shinji talk was like a punishment. On the way, the bus stopped at a service area and some students went to the restroom. Kaede took this opportunity to meet Yuya. They both inquired about their trips. Kaede seemed very happy because she had chatted with Utsuki and listened to music, but Yuya wasn't so pleased. He felt tired of listening to Shinji talk the whole way during the trip. Then they got back on the bus and continued their journey. Finally, they arrived at their destination. Upon arrival, the students attended a briefing on the day's schedule at a place called Manor House. Afterwards, they moved to the log cabin where they would be staying and began unpacking. After the event at Manor House ended, Yuya and Higer went to the log cabin. They were both chosen to make shortbread cookies. Before they started cooking, they watched a tutorial video on how to make cookies. However, the video was only in English. Not long after, a friend came to visit them, also knowing that Yuya and Higur would be baking. On the other hand, Nikaido thought about couples in love, like Utsuki and Shinji, or Yuya and Kaede. Nikaido imagined Utsuki and Kaede wearing aprons and their boyfriends seeing them. But immediately, Nikaido realized he had imagined too much and quickly shifted his thoughts. Actually, it wasn't just Nikaido, but Higer and his friend were also thinking about Kaede. They even directly asked Yuya about it. Yuya insisted that he often saw Kaede wearing an apron, making both Higer and his friend jealous of Yuya. Higer sadly said that he would continue to ask Yuya about Kaede. Shortly after, Shinji went to meet Higer and Yuya. Shinji said he would tell Higer many things about Kaede, but that made Yuya jealous. Yuya immediately scolded Shinji for telling him anything about Kaede. The two friends had a little argument, as close friends often do. After that minor argument, Yuya and Shinji acted as if nothing had happened. Then both left, leaving their two friends behind and heading into the grounds. After changing his clothes, Yuya went to the manor first. From a distance, he saw Kaede had recognized him and called out to him. She asked if her outfit suited her. Yuya simply said it was cute and that Kaede looked more mature. Kaede was slightly surprised to hear the word mature, but instead of feeling offended, she gently whispered in Yuya's ear and explained that she wore that outfit because she knew Yuya seemed to want a more mature girlfriend. Yuya felt a little guilty for making Kaede jealous with his thoughts. However, inwardly he felt a flutter in his stomach when he saw Kaede in her new outfit. Kaede really wanted to kiss Yuya right then and there. Unfortunately, Utsuki and Shinji suddenly appeared. Utsuki immediately pulled Kaede away from Yuya, and Shinji also pulled Yuya away from Kaede. The sudden appearance of Utsuki and Shinji surprised both Yuya and Kaede. Shinji apologized for interrupting Yuya and Kaede's time, while Utsuki warned Kaede to be mindful of her actions. However, both Yuya and Kaede felt slightly uncomfortable with the behavior of their close friends. When entering the kitchen, Utsuki and Kaede never forget to put on their aprons. Meanwhile, Yuya and Shinji also entered the kitchen. Both immediately looked towards their girlfriends. Yuya couldn't help but be surprised to see Kaede. She looked completely different from usual. Kaede innocently asked Yuya how he thought she looked, and Yuya suddenly found himself speechless. He just remained silent and uttered, "I lost." He simply couldn't stand Kaede's beauty. Of course, Yuya's actions made Kaede extremely happy. Conversely, Shinji didn't hesitate to show his delight when looking at Utsuki. At this point, Yuya thought he had finished his cooking. The students also noticed that Yuya looked more handsome while cooking. A few female students invited Kaede over because she might make Yuya fall for her. Meanwhile, some male students invited Yuya because he could win people's hearts with his cooking skills. After a busy cooking session, Yuya returned to his cabin and realized he was alone, while his friends were out. He felt tired and missed Kaede. But that feeling of weariness disappeared when Yuya remembered that tomorrow was stargazing. He was worried about the plans he had made and really wanted to tell Kaede that he loved her. He also remembered Shinji's words about why he was worried about a match he was sure to win. However, those words only made Yuya more anxious. Not long after, when Yuya feared he wouldn't be able to sleep, Kaede suddenly arrived. Kaede said that she couldn't sleep well without Yuya either. Kaede hugged Yuya from behind. They both felt a sense of peace in each other's arms. Suddenly, Kaede remembered that the stargazing was tomorrow night. She asked Yuya if he had prepared a surprise for her, eagerly anticipating it. Yuya asserted that Kaede could wait until tomorrow for that surprise. Kaede was delighted to hear that. She no longer felt sad about sleeping alone without Yuya by her side. With a radiant face, Kaede gently kissed Yuya's cheek, leaving him speechless and surprised. Finally, it was time for the students to go skiing. Yuya and Kaede were both wearing identical ski outfits. Their friends noticed and started whispering about them. Kaede was excited because she was used to skiing, while Yuya looked like it was his first time trying the sport. Yuya felt nervous and scared, but Kaede encouraged him to just think of snow as his best friend. With Kaede's encouragement, Yuya tried to overcome his fear. Kaede started skiing first, proving to Yuya that skiing was easy. When it was Yuya's turn, he began to move, taking each step very carefully. After a while, Yuya realized that skiing was actually a lot of fun and not scary at all. He started to speed up, but Kaede worried that Yuya would fall if he went too fast. A moment later, Yuya bumped into Kaede, causing her to fall into his arms. Kaede was very worried about whether Yuya was hurt, but Yuya reassured her not to worry, promising he wouldn't do it again. Neither of them realized they were hugging a little longer than usual, because Kaede didn't want to let go of Yuya. Yuya promised to hug Kaede as much as possible when she returned from the field trip. Kaede was delighted and she reminded him to keep his promise. That evening, the students gathered at the cabin, having all enjoyed their morning skiing. However, Higer and his friends sat together, discussing the relationship between Yuya and Kaede. As Yuya approached, he received countless teasing and envious remarks from his friends. Higer frankly stated that Yuya and Kaede created a sweet atmosphere. Yuya disagreed, realizing that only Kaede was the one flirting with him, while he wasn't the one doing the flirting. Shinji replied that he clearly saw Yuya and Kaede flirting with each other right in front of their friends. Yuya remained silent, trying to ignore Shinji and Utsuki's greetings when they encountered him in the ski lift. Yuya felt annoyed at being teased by his friends and tried to ignore them, but ultimately he couldn't. Finally, with a gloomy expression, Yuya decided to leave the log cabin to get some fresh air. When Yuya went outside, he was so amazed by the beautiful sky that he couldn't wait to go stargazing with Kaede. While Yuya was thinking about a surprise plan for Kaede, Kaede unexpectedly appeared. She asked about what had happened at the group of men's house. With a touch of discomfort, Yuya recounted how his friends had teased him with jokes and expressed jealousy about what had happened earlier. Kaede felt sorry for Yuya, but she felt the same way because Utsuki kept teasing her, even if it was just a joke. After a brief conversation, Utsuki and Shinji appeared. Then, all four of them, Yuya, Kaede, Utsuki, and Shinji, went to find a place to stargaze. Students were allowed to stargaze wherever they wanted. Upon arriving at a suitable location, Shinji encouraged Yuya to ensure his plan went smoothly. Yuya was nervous about confessing his feelings to Kaede, but he still tried not to let his fear get the better of him. Finally, Shinji and Yuya approached Utsuki and Kaidi. They split into two different groups to stargaze. At that time, Yuya went with Kaidi, and Utsuki went with Shinji. Kaide led Yuya up a hill that she heard her instructor say was a great spot for stargazing. She was very excited to take Yuya there, but suddenly she tripped over the icy ground and nearly fell forward. Luckily, Yuya caught her just in time, grabbing her hand and holding her close. Yuya gently reminded her to hurry up the hill ahead, but Kaide wanted them to stay in that position a little longer. With her pleading, her body touching his chest, how could he refuse? A blush quickly spread across Yuya's cheeks, but he quickly regained his composure and gently released Kaidi. Yuya told her that after stargazing, he wanted to talk to her about something important. Kaidi agreed and looked forward to the conversation. She also said that they could continue hugging each other while walking afterward. She was eagerly anticipating what he had to say. Yuya wondered if Kaidi knew that he was about to confess his feelings to her. After a while, they reached the hill. Kaidi pointed to the winter triangle Betelgeuse, Sirius, and Procyon, stars they couldn't see from the city. Kaidi exclaimed excitedly, unable to believe they would be able to see them together. Yuya agreed, saying he felt incredibly happy to be with her. However, when Kaidi asked the question with a slight tremor in her voice, she seemed worried. Yuya felt a strange unease. There was something he couldn't tell her. Yuya asked Kaidi if she was willing to listen, and she nodded, saying she was ready and let him speak. Yuya sighed, blaming himself for being the one to say this. Just thinking about Kaidi potentially rejecting him made his heart ache. He began talking about their life together. He spoke about the things he had learned from her and how his feelings for her had gotten out of control. Yuya admitted that his love frightened him, fearing that one day she would leave him and go somewhere else. Although he knew she wasn't that kind of person, he decided he couldn't keep his feelings a secret any longer. The more he got to know her, the more he realized his feelings for her were turning into love. He was in love with her. When Yuya finished his confession, both of them blushed, and Kaidi, overcome with emotion, hugged him tightly. She was overjoyed to hear his confession of his feelings for her. Tears welled up in her eyes, and Yuya quickly apologized for making her wait so long. However, Kaide smiled and said she didn't mind, and that the wait was worth it. As they parted ways, Kaide tearfully admitted that she loved Yuya Yoshizumi more than anyone else. Yuya gently wiped away her tears and softly patted her cheek. Then, Kaide told Yuya that she felt happy when he hugged her, and gently patted his back. Yuya felt confused, but then, Kaide unexpectedly pulled his arm around his neck, leaned up, and placed her lips on his. They kissed for a long time, and Kaide confessed her feelings once again. She thanked him for confessing his love to her. Afterward, they continued stargazing for a while. However, Kaide's sudden declaration left Yuya bewildered. Kaide wanted to sleep next to him that night. She explained that she wanted to secretly change sleeping positions, but Yuya immediately refused. Kaide was surprised because she thought her new lover wanted to be with her that night. However, Yuya explained that he didn't want his friends to see her in his pajamas. He couldn't accept the offer because he wanted to be the only one who could see her in those cute and warm pajamas. Kaide couldn't understand Yuya's possessiveness, and she was stunned when she heard his reason. Yuya explained that it was normal to want to be the only one to know the sweetness of the love she had for him. Finally, Kaide agreed with him, not wanting others to see her in her pajamas because she would feel very vulnerable. She leaned on Yuya's shoulder and asked if he could give her a kiss before they went back. Just as their faces drew closer, unexpectedly their close friends appeared. Kaide and Yuya jumped back in panic, trying to hide their embarrassment. Utsuki came to pick up Kaide, but he didn't expect her to be so bold. Kaide felt ashamed and scolded Utsuki for interrupting their moment. While Kaide was angry with Utsuki, Shinji approached Yuya. He guessed that Yuya had finally expressed his feelings. Yuya scratched his cheek, thanked Shinji, but also reminded him to be more careful next time and not interrupt such important moments. Shinji awkwardly apologized for the interruption. Yuya exclaimed loudly that if it was their first kiss, then their close friends couldn't escape the fact. But Kaide immediately interrupted Yuya, asking how he could say it so naturally without feeling embarrassed. Yuya patted her head and replied that of course he felt shy, but what disappointed him more was not being able to kiss her. Their friends stared, surprised by the couple's public display of affection. Utsuki suggested that Shinji go ahead and leave the newly in love couple alone in their own world. Shinji agreed, reminding them not to stay out too late. Both still blushing from their friends' comments, they held hands and decided to go back. Before leaving, Kaide asked Yuya once more if she could sneak into his room, but Yuya still refused. Finally, they arrived home at dawn, ready to go to school. Yuya was sleeping in Kaide's arms when she woke him up, teasingly calling him lazy. When Yuya opened his eyes, he realized they were lying in a very intimate position and asked why she was sleeping next to him. Kaide pouted, explaining that she felt lonely because he hadn't woken up. At first, Yuya just patted her head to comfort her. Kaide then admitted she liked it when Yuya patted her head. But there was also something else she wanted to do with him in the morning. He gently poked her head, and she asked why he did that. Didn't he remember their promise? The promise to kiss her good morning and good night every day. Kaide protested, but Yuya was now sitting near the edge of the bed, reminding her that they needed to get ready for school. Kaide, annoyed, closed her eyes and pretended to be a sleeping princess, saying she would sleep in and only wake up when Yuya kissed her. Yuya, with a resigned expression, decided to grant her silly request. He kissed Kaide, and for a moment, his body leaned towards her, both their hearts pounding. Kaide's hair flushed red with surprise when Yuya kissed her. After the kiss, Yuya got up to prepare for school, leaving Kaide lying on the bed trying to recover from the kiss. Suddenly, Kaide sat up and told Yuya that he had to take responsibility and marry her. Yuya laughed, amused by Kaide's idea, and then playfully teased her. A little while later, when Yuya had finished getting ready, he stood in front of the mirror brushing his teeth, stunned to see Kaide appear in revealing clothing. He blushed and quickly adjusted her clothing, explaining that he didn't want her to get cold if her clothes were left so revealing. Kaide just giggled and teased, "Yuya, I love you." Yuya shook his head at her teasing, then handed her the toothbrush and they brushed their teeth together. Yuya thought to himself that they looked like a newlywed couple. Kaide finished brushing her teeth, then pondered and admitted it. Yuya quietly reflected on the past issues that led to their current life together. He didn't want to remain dependent on Kaide or her family forever. He didn't want to end up like his father who left for the country. While he was still lost in his thoughts, Kaide suddenly interrupted him, saying she wanted them both to work hard because the final exams were approaching. Yuya also remembered that he had been asked to inherit Kaide's father's position, so he had to pass his final exams before he could go to university. On the way to school, it started to drizzle lightly, so they both took shelter under one umbrella. Kaide still wanted to cling to him. And just like that night, their close friends unexpectedly showed up, disrupting their private moment. Utsuki and Shinji teased them for sharing an umbrella. Utsuki asked Kaide if she was happy, and she was indeed happy to be embraced by her lover. Seeing this, Utsuki imitated her, happily sharing her umbrella with Shinji, despite the murderous glares from the other girls around them. Utsuki asked Kaide about her exam preparation, and Kaide replied that although the material was quite extensive, she was still on track with her studies. Utsuki suggested that the whole group should hold a study session together, and Shinji agreed with the idea. Because Kaide wanted to concentrate better in a quiet place, she suggested the group study at her house. Yuya could only remain silently apprehensive, as Utsuki was enthusiastic about the idea. They discussed whether they could do it over the weekend, and who would join. Shinji asked if they should invite Nikaido, but Yuya was sure she would decline. However, Kaide didn't want to leave Nikaido out. She objected and said she would invite her later. Utsuki watched them worriedly. After school, Nikaido accepted their invitation, much to Yuya's surprise. He thought she would refuse as usual, but this time, she said she wanted to try the group study session because it sounded interesting. She added that she wanted to know what Kaide's family mansion looked like. Yuya immediately froze. He had explained to his friends that Kaide's mother let him stay for free, but he didn't want people to know that they lived together in that house. Nikaido further explained that if Kaide and Nikaido taught Yuya together, his grades would improve. Yuya nodded in agreement, thinking to himself that his score would surely skyrocket. Nikaido teased him, telling him to prepare himself because she was a very strict teacher. Yuya begged Nikaido to be gentle with her, to which she replied that she would consider it if he called her sensei. Yuya readily bowed and complied with her request. Nikaido blushed, surprised that Yuya, the person she secretly loved, would actually do that. She turned the page, covered her mouth with the book, and quietly breathed a sigh of relief when she heard Yuya call her name. The next day, they had a physical education class, but because it had been raining all morning, they had to change their usual schedule. The boys planned to play soccer outdoors with the other classes, while the girls would play basketball indoors. However, in the end, the boys had to play basketball indoors as well. Yuya pushed the basketball hoop near the court, watching the boys excitedly. Nikaido asked him about it. Yuya shrugged, explaining that men are simple creatures. They get excited when they see something they wouldn't normally see. Nikaido teased him, asking if he would get excited seeing her in her gym uniform. Yuya shook his head, saying he didn't think that would excite him. Nikaido pouted and conceded, saying it would be different if it were his girlfriend's tracksuit. Yuya agreed and pictured Kaide in her tracksuit. Nikaido just sighed, then teased him about being a secret admirer. Yuya said that the boys were all excited because they had a chance to impress the girls, and that it was very easy for them. Nikaido agreed with him, then said that she wasn't the one who could comment on this either. Yuya looked at her in confusion. Nikaido brushed it off and said that she wanted to be more serious. Nikaido wanted Yuya's attention and encouragement, which made him breathe a sigh of relief and happily watch her back. The match began, with the boys playing first. Yuya admitted that although soccer was his favorite sport, basketball was also quite interesting. Nikaido approached Yuya, who was resting after the game. She was surprised that he played better than she expected. Yuya modestly denied her compliment, saying he was nothing compared to the basketball team captain, and also because his opponents had rather repetitive playing styles. However, Nikaido insisted that she was impressed with him, even though he wasn't a member of the basketball team. She promised to play even more impressively since she was a member of the basketball team. While the girls were discussing tactics, Yuya looked at her and thought she was about to give it her all in the next game. And indeed, she continued to score a lot of points. The game became tense. One of her opponents tried to block her shot, but unfortunately, she was bumped into by another girl and twisted her ankle. The whole class looked at her with worried eyes. The girl apologized, but Nikaido just smiled and reassured her not to worry, as it was just a minor sprain. Nikaido felt certain that the pain would subside after applying ice and resting for a while. She asked her teacher for permission to go to the infirmary. The teacher agreed and asked if she needed any help, but she refused. Seeing her condition, Yuya decided to follow her and asked Shinji to keep an eye on her. Shinji could only feel anxious and uneasy, knowing it would be difficult to deceive that strict and intimidating teacher. On the way to the infirmary, Yuya caught up with Nikaido and asked if she was all right. She was slightly surprised to see him. He advised her not to pretend she was okay, then offered his shoulder for her to lean on. Nikaido accepted, walking slowly, but luckily Yuya was able to support her in time. She blushed when she realized her chest had accidentally brushed against his right arm. The awkwardness made her feel guilty, but Yuya denied it, saying he was just helping her because she had lost her balance due to the pain. Both of them felt uncomfortable in the situation. She felt like she was bothering him, but Yuya just smiled and told her not to worry. He asked if she could try going further. Nikaido replied that she would give it a try, even though it would be difficult. Yuya thought for a moment, then seemed to have made a decision. Yuya bent down and hunched his back, and Nikaido, startled, realized what he meant. He offered to carry her since no one was staring at them. Nikaido felt a little embarrassed, but still gently jumped onto Yuya's back and wrapped her arms around his neck. After she settled down, Yuya told her to hold on tight because he was about to leave quickly. Nikaido felt guilty and thanked him for carrying her. They both went to the infirmary where the nurse asked about Nikaido's condition. Yuya decided to return to the gym, but Nikaido unexpectedly grabbed his shirt, wanting him to stay a little longer. The nurse cheerfully said she would explain to the teacher so Yuya could stay with her. The situation was really awkward for both of them. The nurse examined Nikaido's sprained ankle and explained that the injury was prone to recurrence, so she would apply ice and that Nikaido needed to go to the hospital for further examination. Nikaido listened and sat still, knowing that it would be difficult to walk. The nurse asked Yuya to help Nikaido in the meantime, and he readily agreed. The nurse left, jokingly telling them to keep protecting the little princess. Nikaido could only protest, saying that she wasn't a princess. During the next class, Utsuki asked about Nikaido's leg. She replied that although it still hurt a little, it wasn't so bad that she couldn't walk, and she planned to see a doctor at the end of the week. Utsuki sighed as it meant Nikaido wouldn't be able to attend the group study session. Nikaido regretted not being able to be strict with Yuya during the lesson, but Kaide showed affection for Yuya, hinting that she would go easy on him. Nikaido scolded her, forbidding her from spoiling Yuya too much, because she worried that Yuya would become lazy in his studies if she didn't maintain strict discipline. Kaide reassured Nikaido, saying that Yuya was still studying so hard every day that she wanted him to relax a little. At that time, Utsuki had a great idea. She suggested holding group study sessions after class, since there were no clubs during the exam week. Nikaido agreed and said she could join in the afternoon. Yuya also commented that it was a very good idea because they could also ask the teacher, praising Utsuki's initiative. Utsuki shyly asked Yuya to compliment her more and buy her a bottle of water. Yuya looked at her in surprise and retracted his words, thinking that Utsuki's girlfriend, Shinji, was truly a strange person. Shinji looked at Yuya apologetically, and then he realized that perhaps this was Shinji's idea. Kaide was excited about the after-school study session, as it meant she would be teaching Yuya both at school and at home. Yuya asked if he could rely on her, and she happily said he could completely trust Kaide. Watching their interaction, Utsuki asked why these two were creating such a sweet atmosphere so naturally. Shinji concluded that there was no need to worry about it, recounting what Yuya and Kaide had done while stargazing at the field trip. They even wanted to follow Yuya and Kaide since they hadn't gone home yet. Yuya quickly covered Shinji's mouth in panic, shouting that he shouldn't let Shinji say any more. Yuya was still angry that Shinji and Utsuki had interrupted them at an inopportune time, especially with Kaide, who wanted a secret meeting thanks to them. Hearing this, Nikaido questioned Kaide about it. Actually, Kaide blushed and called it her runner high moment. Her reason was that it was after their first confession and kiss. Hearing this, Yuya wanted Kaide to stop talking about it, but Nikaido was curious to know what happened afterward. Yuya also scolded her, while Utsuki tried to record the story on her phone, ignoring Yuya's protest.